Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Advisory Commission on Special Education meeting. We are happy that you are here with us. Welcome to the commissioners, members of the public in the room, as well as online. We have a very full agenda today and a number of reports, and so we will do our best to honor the time commitments as they are outlined in the agenda, but we will move through efficiently, and so can't guarantee that we'll be able to land specifically on the times allotted outside of items 14 and 9. There may be some flexibility depending on the lengths of the reports. So with that, I will call the meeting to order, and we will begin with a roll call.
Commissioner Tostin.
Present.
Commissioner Graff. Commissioner Estes. Commissioner Hamilton.
Present.
Commissioner Liu.
Present.
Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Michaud.
Present.
Commissioner Notch.
Present.
Commissioner Oyakawa.
Here.
Commissioner Ruiz.
Here.
Commissioner Snipes.
Present.
Commissioner Sorter. Commissioner Topalian.
Here.
And Commissioner Wilkins.
Thank you. It appears we have a quorum. And thank you to our commissioners who are joining us online. We appreciate your dedication. With that, please rise for the salute of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now we will move into the review of the agenda. We'll begin with item 8, an update and action related to the seating of our student commissioners. Item 9, we have a presentation from Katie Brackenridge related to whole child educational design. Item 10, we will have our commissioners report, an update from commissioners related to activities since our last meeting. Item 11, we will have our reports from the State Board of Education, the Director of State Special Schools. And item 12, we will have the Special Education Director's Report presented by Deputy Superintendent Sarah Neville-Morgan and Interim Director Shiyloh Duncan-Becerril. We will break for lunch near noon and return at 1 o'clock for our study sessions. A note for those of you who are members of the public who are joining online, this will not be telecast as we will be in separate locations for the committee work, and we will re-adjourn for a committee report out before going into item 14. Item 14, we are pleased to have presenters from the Learning Policy Institute to deepen our understanding related to community schools. They'll be reviewing a report that they developed in a case study based on Oakland Unified School District's implementation of community schools. We will close the day with our committee reports and planning to build our agenda for the next meeting. We will close the day with public comment and adjourn shortly thereafter. Any questions or need for clarification from commissioners related to the agenda? Perfect. If I can ask our teammates from CDE to please share the slide with the instructions for public comment for those who are participating via web. As you can see, the dial-in number and participant code, we ask that public comments be limited to or focused on the current topic on the agenda. Prior to making the comment, please make sure that your computer volume is muted to avoid feedback, and we'd ask you to share your name, and if you are representing an organization, to please state that. Additionally, if you are interested, you can certainly email us with the email listed on the screen. For members of the public who wish to make comment in the room, we will make a call to begin lining up behind the podium, and we will take you in order. Please, for everyone, limit your public comments to 2 minutes, and our teammates who are manning the call will alert you when the time limit has been reached. Thank you. So communications and announcements, we just wanted to remind everyone, as Director Becerril did earlier, to please, if you have completed your travel reimbursement forms, to submit them today. For our commissioners who are online, feel free to do that at the next meeting or email them in per the instructions. And so moving into our agenda, as we continue our work from yesterday and our conversations from yesterday, I wanted to, again, recall the presentation from the Supporting and Inclusive Practices team related to experiences. And a number of our presentations today are geared around the experiences related to community schools, as well as student voice and whole child education. And so as we continue to understand or deepen our understanding in these areas, one of our measures will be how we begin to apply it in our work, in our language, how we communicate through our different channels. So very excited about that, and really excited and pleased that our first item is the conclusion of the process to identify our student commissioners, or commissioners who are students currently. Actually, that doesn't work either, because there are a number of us who are currently in school. So our two newest commissioners who will be joining us, and this is as a result of a Senate Bill 291, student commissioners who will be voting and have a voice. And so it's very fulfilling for us as a commission to be practicing what we believe in terms of student voice and ensuring that that voice has impact. And so with that, I am pleased to open item 8, the seating of student commissioners. I have asked Commissioner Ruiz to review the process and share some information, and then we will move to making our action item, or approving the recommendation from the process of our two new commissioners, and then a general conversation and feedback around how we might begin to prepare and orient ourselves as a commission. Commissioner Ruiz.
Exciting. Okay. Over the past couple of months, our selection committee worked in partnership with the California Transition Alliance and members of the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project to develop an application, questions, and a rubric that were used in the interview process. And we are delighted to share that we have chosen our student commissioner finalists. There were 15 total applicants, all of whom met the following criteria based on ACSE bylaws. The student must be 16 to 22 years old. The student must be enrolled in an educational setting such as high school, college, CTE, etc. And the student must be or have been previously identified as having a disability. Each of the 15 applicants were well qualified, and we wish we could have moved them all forward. However, those who were not chosen as finalists have been provided information regarding local advisory groups within their communities, such as workability, regional leadership groups, and other focused groups, so that they may still continue providing their perspective and build on their leadership skills. We then narrowed our selection to 4 finalists, and of those 4, we have chosen 2 students who impressed the interview and selection committee with their perspective, experience, and interest in advocacy for students with disabilities in California. These 2 students embody the mission and vision of this commission, and we are looking forward to our future together. Without further ado, we are pleased to announce that we have chosen to appoint Rachel Ding and Saren Tugsjargol as our 2 ACSE student commissioners. Rachel and Saren will be contacted by our student selection committee with further information about their appointment between now and our next ACSE meeting in October of 2023. We would like to extend special thanks to Dee Torrington, Joyce Montgomery, Sean Spence, and Valerie Wiltz, and Kevin Schaefer for helping us develop our selection process and to move all of our student candidates forward and sharing their time, passion, and expertise with us. So thank you. And I'm just not sure if Commissioner Snipes would like to add anything to that.
I think you did an amazing job, and I'm so excited to meet our new commissioners. And I feel fortunate to have been a part of this process. And I thank everyone on the commission for moving this forward. Very exciting.
And also, Chair Tostin, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you. And I want to acknowledge Commissioner Ruiz and Commissioner Snipes for their commitment and flexibility and responsiveness through this process. This was new for everyone. And so our two co-chairs of the committee who were leading this process, as well as the support team from CDE, as we were facilitating some of the final details. So I want to acknowledge everyone who's contributed to that process, as well as acknowledging the two commissioners who I believe are joining in as members of the public today. And so to add a little more detail, and I'm sure we'll learn more about them when they're here with us in person, but briefly just to share a little bit about Rachel Ding. She has a history of volunteerism. She's collaborated with educators during the pandemic and advocated and shared information related to how our safety precautions during the pandemic impacted the ability to communicate. And so working with educators to find solutions and ways to ensure that there was still the same connection through her educational process. She is passionate about the arts and uses art to communicate and express information about who she is as a woman and as a person. And so she is very clear on how we can best support her, and we'll be working with all of us to make sure that this environment meets all of our needs. And in the future, she envisions herself being able to continue her advocacy through some role in public service. We are excited to have Rachel join us and look forward to meeting you in person. A few details about Saran Tuggs-Droggle. And Saran, we are sorry if we're not doing a great job pronouncing your name. We're doing the best we can. So our pronunciation today is per the internet, pronunciation key. And we look forward to making sure that we are stating your name in the way that it's intended when we're able to meet you in person. Saran also has a history of volunteerism and has volunteered in areas that focus on the elimination of human trafficking. I believe Saran is a multilingual learner and stated at some point throughout the process, taking risk is how we learn and grow. And that just really resonated with me in terms of all of the information that they shared that really was inspirational to me, and is aligned with, I believe, some of the stories that we have shared with each other around our personal experiences as commissioners. And certainly, learning is taking a risk and requires a level of vulnerability. Saran has also participated in leadership opportunities at school via ASB, and also is interested in a future that includes some level of public service to improve the world and make it a better place for all. And so I wanted to share just those few details to personalize our new commissioners. And so with that, I'll pause and see any other comments from the dais before we take our action to affirm the recommendations from the process. All right, so a little more drumbeat. So to my knowledge, California is the first state in the nation to seat voting student members. So we're all involved in a historical moment here. So yay. There should be music or a band or something, and that's what it feels like. So maybe that happens after the vote. Balloons will fall. So with that, is there a motion to approve the recommendations to seat Saran Jargle and Rachel Ding as our newest commissioners.
I'd like to move.
We have one motion. Would you be willing to second, Commissioner Liu? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. With that, Denise, can we have the roll call vote?
Commissioner Tostin,
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu, Commissioner Michaud,
Yes.
Commissioner Notch,
Yes.
Commissioner Oyakawa,
Yes.
Commissioner Ruiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Snipes,
Yes.
Commissioner Sorter,
Yes.
Commissioner Topalian,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wilkins.
Yes.
I believe the motion passes unanimously. We made history. Look at that. Just the bureaucratic part. I think it'll be far more celebratory when we actually have our new commissioners in the room with us. And so now I wanted to spend a few moments just thinking through the transition to adding two new commissioners and some details that we might want to consider. And I want to frame this appropriately, not based on individual needs, because we all have them, but just thinking about as we are expanding our space, strategies that we might use to ensure that everyone is able to participate and have a sense of belonging, but then also new opportunities that we have with our new commissioners to focus on student voice and to hear different perspectives than we currently bring in our capacities. So, for example, one note that I thought of: should we have or establish a committee related to student voice and experience, to be very thoughtful and mindful about how we include those perspectives in a more formal way on the agenda, because while we all have our different perspectives, we're not a monolith or don't represent everyone who has similar characteristics as us. And so having a focus on how we can ensure we deepen our understanding of the student experience. Seeing some consensus around the dais. Okay. Other thoughts, suggestions, considerations?
I think just as a basic with regard to that, we are very mindful about acronyms and just certain things that we make it a practice to say what they mean. I think that is not just for student commissioners, but for the parents that I represent, I think that's a very basic thing. Also, I think it's a mark of us really knowing what we're talking about when we can make it in really simple terms. And I think those are two main points that I'd like to see occur with our new student commissioners.
Thank you. Commissioner Notch.
I wanted to suggest that we invite our new commissioners to be part of that committee, if maybe that was your intention. Excellent. I think I was really excited to hear when you shared that Rachel is very clear about what she needs, and in demonstrating self-advocacy and self-determination. I think it would be wonderful to maybe pause on some of the broader details until we have them, but I'm excited, and it absolutely aligns with our first priority for centering student and family voice. So excellent idea.
And I appreciate that. Our new commissioner is certainly invited to participate in a leadership role and co-chair that committee, but being very clear, it's not limited just to our new commissioners. And so anyone who has an interest in participating in that conversation can certainly do so. We talked yesterday, there may be some logistical changes on the podium just to accommodate two new chairs and making sure everyone has line of sight to obviously all the resources that are in the room. Yes, I'm sorry.
I agree with my colleague, Commissioner Ruiz and Notch, and also Snipes, and I want to thank them for putting on this.
Yeah, I think that one's not working right.
All right, I think this mic is a lot better. I just want to thank my colleagues, Commissioner Ruiz, Notch, and Snipes for putting together this program and being the lead in determining our student board members, an inaugural class of student board members for our commission. I think that's wonderful. I myself just last week put in our first student board members to my school district also. And it's been a project that I had and took way too long for me. But I think this is a wonderful way of having more voice. And I was just wondering if we have information as to whether they're from Northern California or Southern California and around how old they are.
So ages would be between 16 and 22. I believe one commissioner is from Northern California. I'm not sure on the location of the other. Specifically in the application materials, I'm not seeing it like immediately, but I believe they represent, or that was one of the criteria that we would try and have representation from different locations in the state. Other thoughts, questions?
I just want to thank our committee's members for taking the lead on that. And I think it was Chair Havanya White beforehand also was instrumental in getting this going. And thank you, Chair Tostin, for also taking over and making sure that we go forward. This is really exciting. New commissioners, if you're watching, we're all really excited to meet you. Congratulations. And I also wanted to say, what Commissioner Ruiz said about making things more accessible. I think it's not just for student commissioners, it's for lay people like me as well, and those in the audience. So I think it's helpful for everyone to make our language and the whole process as accessible for everyone as possible. Thank you.
Some other logistical pieces that our support team at CDE will have to obviously update the website with bios, and any commissioner who hasn't done so, please update your bio as necessary so that information is available on the website. And also thinking about our next meeting, since it will be their first meeting and they'll be casting votes, wanted to make the suggestion. This has all been made possible by Senator Henry Stern, who authored the bill. And so the Legend Policy Committee, if I could tap you guys to maybe connect with his office and extend an invitation as we welcome in our new commissioners as a result of his foresight and vision for inclusion for the commission. Well, all right. With that, not seeing any additional comments. Checking with commissioners online, any additional input or comments? Seeing none, I will ask for the slide for public comment. Any members of the public in the room wishing to make comment, please line up behind the podium now.
Good morning, Commissioners. SELPA Association of California also very excited about two new board members coming on, two new commissioners. As mentioned by my colleague from SECO yesterday about your intentionality around liaisons, I too appreciate your intentionality around bringing two commissioners onto the ACSE Commission. Also, the transition piece is going to be very important, and then how they could be meaningfully contributing and participating in future ACSE meetings. So we look forward to having them on board and seeing them in person.
Seeing no additional public comments in the room, we will check online. Are there any public comments for those participating via web?
There are no callers at this time.
All right, well, then we will conclude this item. And so right now we are a little ahead of schedule. And so what I would like to propose, our next item begins at 10 o'clock. So we're 30 minutes ahead. We haven't had committee time yet, so item 10. Oh, yes. Let me just check the room. If we move up item 10 and share our commissioner reports, I would also like to, if depending on availability, I know Deputy Neville-Morgan may have other commitments, so she may not be able to be here earlier.
Deputy Neville-Morgan is not going to be able to be here today, so I'll be speaking on behalf. So I'm happy to cover that.
Okay. So why don't we jump into, we'll propose amending the agenda, and we will go to item 10, commissioner reports, for the next few moments. And then after our presentation or our break after item 9, we will move into the report from the State Special Schools and State Board, and then the Special Ed Director's report, and we'll head into lunch a little early. Does that work for everyone? Okay, so with that, we will move into, I don't know what the new number is. We'll go into commissioner reports. The agenda is all very different now. And so commissioner reports are an opportunity for us to share our activities from the last meeting. And so whether we have been at conferences, had an opportunity to speak with partners in the field, just to share that information with all of us for our learning, and if there are any follow-up actions. And so I will share and break the ice. If anyone else needs a few moments to get their thoughts together. And so since our last meeting, obviously we've been in transition as we have moved from last year's cycle of meetings to this year's cycle of meetings. And so I had an opportunity to have a conversation with the president of the State Board, Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond. And we had a conversation about the board's priorities and areas of the work that they are excited about. And one of the details that she highlighted was excitement about the continuing work of the IEP template group, recognizing the vision is developing an IEP template that is more assets-based and allows for the conversations that we really want to focus on, recognizing there are a number of mandated components, but how can we refresh the forms that we use in line with the aspirations we have for the conversation and the environments we create around the IEP table. We had a conversation about the impact of the teacher shortage and how that is impacting school districts, charter schools, county offices from tip to tip in our state. There was an article recently in the LA Times highlighting some of the challenges of teacher recruitment in small rural counties. And it referenced someone who presented to us at our last meeting from Modoc County, the superintendent, who was highlighting the unique challenges of small rural districts as it relates to a number of areas. The state oversight system that is, that again, from the feds, we want to be very clear about that, that sometimes can trap or keep small rural districts in a cycle based on a unique population size or a unique attribute of their student population. And the article highlighted just how difficult it is to recruit folks to move to small rural communities in the larger context of a teacher shortage. Some of the commissioners yesterday were sharing with the challenges that they are currently experiencing in filling vacancies for special ed teachers, service providers, and general ed teachers as well, to ensure that we have enough teammates to be responsive to the needs of students. And so recognizing that shortage, and then also extending accommodation for everyone who's actively engaged in doing the work with students, knowing that we may not be at full capacity. And so that's an area that's been highlighted for us to see if there are areas that we might be able to shed light on different strategies that are working for LEAs, whether small, rural, suburban, or urban, that might lead to pathways to increase the number of educators. This conversation is consistent across the state. I believe I shared in my last report out the California Association of Speech Pathologists and Hearing Specialists also identified the shortage of individuals who are willing to or who are available to become employed in our public school systems. And we also touched on the importance of literacy and the work of our developing the dyslexia guidelines in the screener and how that will, as we heard yesterday from our Gold Award recipient, how that will deepen the work and broaden the understanding of one of the fundamental components of education in terms of literacy and how we can be more responsive to the needs of our students. Additionally, I had the pleasure of meeting with the Special Education Administrators of California, the acronym SECO, in their summer meeting. We had a great conversation, and what came up there again was also the shortage of specialists and special ed providers and teachers, especially in the programs typically operated by our county offices of education that provide resources for a number of districts in the community and have additional wrinkles in the work that they're doing in terms of serving a broad community that reaches sometimes multiple counties. We also had a great conversation about the opportunities for partnership to solve some of these challenges. So how can we and how can our different statewide groups find opportunities to collaborate and have shared conversation and brainstorming and solution opportunities for our shared challenges in the moment. And so I want to thank Dr. Darling Hammond for her time, as well as the SECO administrators for their invitation to spend a few moments with them. Also want to highlight the work of the Orange County Department of Education and Butte County Office of Education. I had an opportunity to attend the Multiple Tiered Systems of Support conference during the summer. And the theme this year was related to equity. And so how can we, as we're developing multiple tiered systems of support, deepen our lens and understanding of equity and use the data to drive our responses and the systems that we're developing. And so by my rough count, I'd say roughly 3,000, maybe 2,500 to 3,000 educators convening in the summer to deepen their understanding and learn more. And I also want to highlight at this conference, there was a strand focused on community and parent engagement and relationships. And so recognizing that core piece, or not piece, recognizing that we must have those partnerships in place to build systems that are going to be responsive to the needs of our local communities, and the shared capacity building. In one conversation with one of the leaders, they recognized that as we all, or as educators are learning more about multiple tiered systems of support and using the language, how do we ensure that our parent community and and caregiver community also are deepening their understanding of what these systems mean and how they are implemented in local education agencies? And so that concludes my report. I anticipate I will have more opportunities to connect between now and the next meeting now that we have officially adopted our goals and priorities and begin reaching out to our statewide organizations and other partners in the work. So I will pause there. Anyone else on the dais have a commissioner report? Commissioner Lynch.
Reporting out on behalf of SECO, which you covered one of the highlights already. SECO was very thrilled to welcome you, and a big focus this year is on expanding those partnerships and aligning with our colleagues across the state to create greater impact. We also had Heather DeFede from East San Gabriel? East County. Thank you, audience participants. She was phenomenal. She was presenting about the work that's being done statewide on the alternate pathway to a diploma. And one of the other activities that took place was a planning session to help SECO with setting priorities, not as officially as we did, but to help with agenda building. And some of the top requested topics are really aligned with our priority and goal areas, including inclusion and authentic belonging with intentional environmental design, staff recruitment and retention, training to support students as well as staff in social, emotional, mental health needs. All pathways for sure was a hot topic, as well as highlighting innovative and quality programs across the state. So really learning from what is working well. And there was definitely a request to continue that close partnership with SELPA, California County Superintendents, and ACSE. So congratulations, you were a hit, Chair Tostin.
Commissioner Sorter.
Okay, just a big thank you to California Transition Alliance, right? They played a very critical role in helping us today make history with our two new commissioners. And then the CARS Plus, California Association of Resource Special Educators. Of course, it was summer, and now that we're back, they are planning their conference for February, which I think is good because of the teacher shortage right now. You just talked about the MTSS conference that was during the summer. That's a great time to get educators, because I know in the next few months, it's very hard to get people to be approved for conferences. So having theirs, it will be in February, and looking at their topics, and there's a call for presenters, is around developing the professional educator, IEP accommodations, universal design for learning, social and emotional learning are just some of the topics, but again, aligned with kind of the goals of what we're doing here today.
Hi, I just want to say that the FECs will be up here Monday. So next week we have a big conference. We'll have lots to discuss. So I know that I'll have lots to report in October.
What is FEC?
Family Empowerment Centers. Thank you for that. Very nice. Yes, the Family Empowerment Center directors will be up in Sacramento next week for a couple days to, talk about all the great stuff that we're up to.
Yes, and I actually have Tuesday on my calendar. So they're there for multiple days, and I'll be connecting with the group on Tuesday. And we've, just to share agenda building, we've already extended an invitation for them to participate at our October meeting, because last year there was an expansion for FECs, and they are excited to share how that work is beginning to develop and give us an update on that growth. Commissioner Oyakawa.
Thank you. I just wanted to first make a comment about your report. I think I heard a similar story on the radio last night about the teacher shortage and the issues they were having in rural areas. And I noted one comment that kind of stuck me about the load that we put on the teachers, all the expectations that are newer. And it reminded me of the conversations we had yesterday with our presenters. And I hope that the teachers on the field and the administrators that support them are able to connect with the resources so that it isn't just a burden and another ask of all these teachers that we do ask a lot of. But I also heard about the community schools this morning. I think was another news story. I'm learning a lot on the drive here, which I know we'll learn more about today. But they talked about wraparound services. And so, I love that. I think it's, a shift, again, a mindset shift. And I hope that potential teachers out there are able to see that we as in the state and parents and families are asking a lot, but we hope that we're also supporting a lot. And I hope they feel that and are excited to come in. And the fiscal side, I can't do anything about, but I just want to say, as far as teachers not getting enough pay, that of course, that's a big part of it. But I want them to know that we are all, anyone who has a chance to, we're all trying to support them. So I just wanted to make a comment about that. I don't have a formal report as a liaison. It's been my summer break, I guess. But I did want to make a note that I have been watching SB 635, which is, I think it's called the California Kids Hear Act, and it's to make fixes to previous legislation that allocated funding to help ensure that children with hearing loss whose families are trying to get hearing aids for them are able to access that. And it's so critical for any child to have language development, to access language, whether it's visual through signing or hearing, or both. And this is, of course, important to my family, and it's a personal issue, but to also so many thousands of families in California. And so I know it's up for, I think, appropriations is next. And there's a lot of support from the families, from the California Hands and Voices group. And so I just wanted to mention that and express my personal support for that as well. And then I wanted to give a shout out to someone in the room, Molly Bowen. She's over there. She's one of our interpreters. And I ran into her when my daughter went to her first sleepaway camp ever at Camp Grizzly, which is for deaf and hard of hearing children. And it was an amazing experience. It's sponsored by NorCal Services for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And it was just life-changing, I think, for her. And so for any other families of kids who are interested, and put in a plug for the program. There are other camps throughout the state, and we were going to try some of them maybe next year as well. It's opened her mind and given her a sense of pride that I've never seen before. And that was just, I was like crying on the way home because it was just amazing for her and her friend. And for anyone who's curious, she is hard of hearing. She's verbal, and her signing skills aren't great, so she was worried about that. But they were so supportive and welcoming, and so really, it's for all deaf and hard of hearing children. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And yay, Molly.
Thank you. Scanning the dais. One last item that I omitted from my report out. I had an opportunity to attend the community schools conference hosted by the State Transformational Assistance Center with Alameda County and a number of other partners. That was in late June. And a number of presentations, many of them focused on how to obviously establish the right culture in the conversation, how to develop effective interagency agreements, and so some of the technical components as well as some of the mindset areas that needed to be addressed. Subsequently, I had an opportunity to speak with Dr. Michael Eisen, who is the program lead at the Alameda County Office of Education for the State Transformational Assistance Center, or STAC, who has a history, one with community schools, but also as a special educator. And so we had a very inspiring conversation about the opportunities, the transformative opportunities provided through community schools. And so I wanted to acknowledge that conversation as well, and suggest at a later date we maybe consider having the state lead for community schools be invited to be a part of our agenda and deepen our learning about the work that's happening and their role in doing that with the regional technical assistance centers. All right.
Hi, everybody. So the governor signed the K-12 budget trailer bill last month, and that included two provisions around charter schools. And so one of them was a one-year extension for all charter terms, and the other was some additional constraints to the appeals process for charter schools that get denied at the local or county level. And so those were two updates from the trailer bill last month.
Okay, so I was able to attend in the summer. It's from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, where it was with students from Los Angeles Unified, and it was something where we would, as part of the Pupil Personnel Service Coalition, and the Counselors Association and myself were there, and we were able to speak to students about what their needs are, what they see in the schools, and it was really eye-opening to hear some of the stories about their some of their experiences within the school, just having them experience, let's say, a police officer walking by, or having SWAT cars outside the school and nobody addressing those things. So it was a real eye-opener, and just being able to hear from them and what their needs are and how we could support the students within the school. We talk about, which was very interesting to me, because we talk about like peer supports and things like that. But when I brought that up, one of the students said, That's not my job. I'm trying to take care of myself. I can't take care of my friend who's sitting next to me. And that was an eye opener because we talk about peer supports. We talk about how they could look at help each other, but just hearing from them and the experience that they've had, because they're hardly surviving themselves. So they want that help. They want us to help them. And also just understanding more about some of the confidentiality and what happens if we get to share it with the parents or what we get to share with the teachers is very important. So that just brought me back to, we need to educate everybody within the schools, and the students are one of those where we need to talk about what this process looks like when we're providing the mental health supports within the school systems. And of course, working with our partners outside as well and bringing in the parents. So it was an eye opener just in that sense.
As we move to conclude this portion of our agenda, I just want to highlight there are a number of opportunities for us to engage, obviously, with partners and other aspects of our world, whether it's your professional responsibilities or your responsibility or engagements that you may have as an individual. And during this opportunity, it does not have to be a formal report of I had X conversation with so-and-so. But an opportunity to highlight any area of the work. For example, I learned today about the Pupil Personnel Services Coalition. That wasn't aware that existed. I thought there was CASP and maybe each individual statewide organization being aware that there is a coalition is information that I think benefits all of us, and we could follow up or just simply become aware of a potential another potential partner to align our work, as well as an opportunity for us to be thoughtful around coalition building. As we are talking about challenges, it's fascinating to hear the echo of priorities across the state. Staff retention and recruitment and shortages is a hot topic for everyone. Do we have an opportunity to highlight what if you over here had a conversation over there, and what if we all just kind of whiteboarded out opportunities or understood barriers? And so please feel free to just share your experiences between meetings, whether it's more of a formal connection as a liaison or new learning that you may have had between the meetings. All right. With that, I will ask for the slide for public comments to be presented. And I'll ask anyone in the room who wishes to make public comment to begin lining up at the podium. Seeing no members of the public wishing to make comment in the room, we will check online.
There are no callers at this time.
That concludes this item. Before we move on to the next item, let's take a 5-minute pause to allow for a transition for the in-room presenter and just a quick stretch break for commissioners. So let's be back in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to move into our next item on the agenda, a whole child presentation by Katie Brackenridge. And I just want to share my excitement for this presentation today on the heels of our conversations yesterday. As we were coordinating the logistics for this presentation, Katie and I had a conversation around, what type of experiences can we have? And I thought, well, we don't necessarily do it that way. It's more of a formal. And based on what we talked about yesterday and knowing the importance of this conversation and the presentation, very excited that we'll have an opportunity to learn, but also have experiences and an opportunity for us to just think about it and reflect what some of the content might mean. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here with us. We yield the floor to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. Thank you all for creating the opportunity for me to share what I've been working on for several years. We're going to be talking today about how kids learn, the way our brains work, and what that means for the design. I see people making signals. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. the way our brains work and what that means for the design of our schools. I want to just start out by saying, in my experience working with folks in special ed, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to feel familiar to you already, because I found that folks working in, I don't know if you call it traditional education or what, don't have as much information as the folks who are working in special education have about a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today. So as I'm talking, I'm hoping you're going to be making connections to what you already know from your own practice. So my name is Katie Brackenridge, and I'm a consultant with the Glenn Price Group, but I have a lot of experience in different fields. So I started my career working in youth development. I ran a youth center in the Mission District in San Francisco. And then I worked for the Partnership for Children and Youth for 14 years, helping to improve the quality of after-school and summer programs across the state, and transitioned that work into the school day when I joined Turnaround for Children about 4 years ago, and learned about all of this amazing science that was the grounding for all of the practices that we had been doing in youth development. So I'm going to share that science with you today. A lot of what I'm talking about comes from the Turnaround for Children. And again, I'm not an expert on special education. I have connections with folks who've told me, and I've heard in those conversations, how much experience you all bring to this kind of information and knowledge. So I feel like I'm potentially preaching to the choir, but offering hopefully a framework and an opportunity to make those connections for yourself and also to all of the initiatives across the state. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that science grounding. We're going to connect it to what that means for whole child design, this vague concept of educating the whole child and how it can be brought down to specifics, and then give you an opportunity to make connections to your own work and to your role here on the committee. So we are talking about this because the state of California has framed so many, I would say all of its initiatives around this idea of educating the whole child. Right in that lobby is this image on the right side here, framed as the superintendent's initiatives around the whole child. But I would argue that what that specifically means is not a shared understanding across the state, has not been clearly defined, and that has created a lot of confusion. So I'm excited today to talk to you about how this actually can be specifically defined, and what that means in particular for all of you in your work connecting to all of these many initiatives. And right up front, and I walked in and you guys were talking about community schools, right? Right up front is the Community Schools Partnership Program that has very explicitly called itself a whole child approach and actually called out the science that I'm going to talk to you about today. But what we really don't have a strong enough grasp on is, what does it mean when we say supporting the whole child? And how do we actually do that? And I think, again, folks in special ed have some answers to that question. We're going to talk about that today. But I like to start this work, this conversation, in reflecting on our own experiences, because those experiences often already are grounded in the science that we're going to talk about. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to think about your origin story, the events, experiences, and relationships that brought you here today. So I'm going to model what I'm talking about with a quick story about my own origin story, and then give you a chance to share with each other your own. So this is a picture of me in the 1990s at a youth agency in Brooklyn, New York. And I was the facilitator for a group of young people who were charged with creating the newsletter for that youth agency. We created together an incredibly rich learning environment that was grounded in the relationships that we had with each other and the support that we gave for each other around the tasks we were doing. And as a result, young people in this group put their heart and soul into the newsletter, really, really deeply appreciated the opportunity for their own voices to be heard and to share the voices of their peers. That experience has run through my whole career as knowing about the deep talents that young people hold and that can be revealed by the way that we as adults interact with them. So I've spent my life trying to help other people figure out how do we create those environments so young people can be all that they are meant to be. So that's my little bit of an origin story. I'm going to give you just a few minutes. Well, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to think about your origin story. And then I'm going to ask you to turn to a partner and share that story with each other for about a minute each. Okay, and I'll let you know when it's time to switch. So first think, give you 30 seconds to think. While you're thinking, I'm going to get my phone so I can time this, and then I'll be right back here. All right, so when you're ready, you guys can go ahead and share, and I'll give you about a minute each to share your stories. I'll tell you when you're going to switch to the other person. Okay, ready, set, go. All right. With a gentle switch, you can switch to the other partner to share. Okay. So I'm hoping everybody got to share their origin story. And you can just wrap up your last few thoughts. All right. Thank you for doing that, for allowing me to mix up the way you usually do things here. So what I learned 30 years after that, my experience with that youth group and my many other years working with young people around youth development is that many of the practices that I was doing were actually based in brain science. We're actually reflective of the ways our brains are interconnected and the attachments across our social, emotional, and cognitive functioning. And that's part of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So hopefully, as you're listening, you can also make those connections to your origin story, to how you got here today, and all of this science and work. And I think it's going to resonate with your own experiences. So we know that the brain is malleable across our entire lifetime. We used to think that brain development stopped in early childhood, maybe around the age of 5. But technology, specifically brain scans, have allowed us to see how our brains are actually changing across our lifetime. There are 20,000 genes in our genome, but only 10% of them ever get expressed. So what is it that determines which genes get activated? It actually happens because our genes are chemical followers that are responding to the physical and social cues around us. That is how the outside world gets inside us. That context is the reason that different genes in our genome actually get activated. And so when I talk about context, it means your experiences, your relationships, and your environment. So like your origin story that impacted who you've become, even at the level of our genes, our context, these experiences, environments, and relationships that we have are impacting deeply who we are. And this fact is an opportunity and a vulnerability, right? Depending on what your context is. Cortisol, or stress is probably the biggest example we have, the most common example we have of a negative context. We all experienced a lot of stress over the past 3 years. What stress does is it releases this hormone you've probably heard about called cortisol into our system. And that's actually adaptive. It's the thing that allows me to be ready and alert for this presentation, or to take a test, or to be on the soccer field, responding, reacting in the ways I need to. And if I'm in danger, it's cortisol that helps me be quick and reactive. What cortisol is doing is impacting the limbic system, the learning center of our brain, which you probably know is our prefrontal cortex, which is around regulation and thoughts and behavior, our hippocampus, which is about learning and memory, and then our amygdala, which is where we hold our reactions and our emotions. And what cortisol does is it floods the limbic system. It activates the amygdala so that we are driven by our reactions, not by long-term planning or remembering something, because that's what we need when we're really in danger. If a bus is coming at us on the street, we do not need to think ahead about what to do. We just need to react to that. So this is a good thing in most cases, unless you're experiencing what I'm sure you've also heard about, unbuffered chronic stress over time. What that does is it means your brain is experiencing high levels of cortisol frequently. And it's almost like your amygdala gets stuck on the on position, so that even when something's not dangerous, you perceive it as dangerous and you react that way. So I've heard countless stories from educators about behavior in classrooms over the past 2 years. It is highly likely that is because students have experienced so much more cortisol than they had in the past, that they're actually responding to what they perceive as danger, even if it's not danger, because their amygdala is on high alert all of the time. That is how adversity impacts us. It's not something that just happens one time. It actually gets into our brains and our bodies. But a word of caution on that, we are not defined by the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Our brains are malleable across our lifetime. So no matter what trauma or adversity people have experienced, they actually can overcome that. And I certainly saw that in the young people that I've worked with over my lifetime, right? Kids coming in with really difficult situations who are totally able to engage and learn and develop very positively in the right environment, right? Because again, our brains are malleable. And that happens in part because of this other fabulous hormone, oxytocin, which is what we experience when somebody even smiles at us or says hello in the hallway or gives us a hug. So when you're feeling kind of bad and you have a good long conversation with a friend, you just got a hormone, oxytocin, and that is the reason that it feels better. Oxytocin directly counteracts the experience of cortisol. And this is why trust is the antidote to stress. It is not just that we should have nice relationships with children because that's a good thing to do. It is actually biologically necessary for their learning that we have trusting relationships with our students in order for their brains to be in balance in order to learn. So I'm going to tell you about a shift in something you may have heard of before called the marshmallow test. This was an experiment done at Stanford University in the 1970s. They gave a group of toddlers one marshmallow, and they told them, if you can wait, I'll give you a second marshmallow. That probably sounds familiar, right? So what they then did was take that group of toddlers, and they divided them up between the kids who are willing to wait, those who delayed gratification, and the ones who gobbled up their marshmallow right away. And then they looked at their long-term outcomes, and they found out that the kids who delayed gratification did much better on all of these indicators, traditional indicators of success, like GPA, high school graduation, college matriculation, even income, health results. And so the conclusion that was drawn from this is that if you have that trait of delayed gratification, you're going to do better in life moving forward. So fast forward to 2017, and a researcher at Rochester University who worked in a homeless shelter wanted to try that experiment out again and see what happens if you change the conditions a little bit. So we're going to watch this video that is going to explain that story.
If I eat 100 marshmallows, I'll be filled up.
Everybody knows that young children, particularly toddlers, 2 to 4-year-olds, are subject to impulsivity. And it has been thought that that is a characteristic that children are born with.
Do you know what? It is snack time now.
And so what we wanted to know is whether or not some of these differences between children can be influenced by their own rational thought processing.
We wanted to manipulate children's beliefs about how reliable the environment that they were in was. We assigned kids to one of two conditions, either the reliable condition or the unreliable condition.
So for the art supplies that you get to use, you actually have a choice. You can either use these crayons right now, or if you can wait for me to go get some from the other room, you can use our big set of art supplies instead.
The kids in the reliable condition, when the experimenter came back into the room, had the better thing. And for the kids in the unreliable condition, the experimenter apologized and said she'd made a mistake. We didn't have that available and then helped them use the first option.
Then I'm so sorry, but I actually don't have that big set of art supplies I told you about. Sorry about that. But you can still use these ones to make your project.
The classic example of a task in which children show impulsivity is what's called the marshmallow task.
For your snack, you have a choice. Look what I've got. Yeah, so wait just a second, let me explain. So you can either eat this one marshmallow right now, or if you can wait for me to go get it from the other room, you can have 2 marshmallows instead.
I want 2 marshmallows.
And what we found, which was an incredibly large effect, the children who were in the unreliable group were more likely to fairly quickly pick up the marshmallow and eat it. So on average, they waited about 3 minutes.
You know, I'd not eat this marshmallow.
The children who were in the reliable group waited 4 times longer. So they waited about 12 minutes, which is an incredibly long time for young children to wait before they get bored.
The difference is maybe due to a difference in expectations about what's likely to happen in the world. That's what this experiment was designed to address.
Any 3-year-old, self-control is not necessarily at the top of their skill base, but in general, when she sets her mind that she's going to do something, she's going to do it.
In the marshmallow task, I was like, what you want to do is you want to get the most amount of marshmallow possible but there may be other considerations. Given that I have this one marshmallow now that's guaranteed, what are the chances that if I wait, there's going to be a second marshmallow later?
If it was a teacher he had all the time, that if they would have that trust bond a little bit longer, that he'd probably wait longer.
One of the lines of work that evolved as a result of the marshmallow task was to look at the outcomes of children's behavior later in life. But something that's been missing from the equation is this rational process by which children are accessing information in their environment and making decisions about whether they should behave in the short term or behave in the long term. So if they're in an environment in which long-term gain is very rare, well, then it makes perfect sense for them to behave impulsively because that's going to maximize their reward.
How's it taste?
A production.
So that boy made a logical choice based on his immediate context, and kids are doing that all the time. But if we can help students to reveal their actual skills and talents by creating the context. Because we know that skills and talents exist in a potential state for all children. So imagine what this means for our learning environments. We have this opportunity to create learning environments in which kids are able to show their full selves. And the opposite is also true. We think about all of the skills and talents we miss when we fail to create the right kind of learning environment for all students. That probably rings incredibly true for all of you. So that's what we do as brain builders, as educators, as facilitators in learning environments, is create those opportunities for kids to build their own brains. So that was a lot. I want to stop here and just give you a minute for your own reflection, and we're going to have another chance to talk to each other. So what sparks your interest in this? How does this relate to your experience? And what are the implications for special education and our education system more broadly, given this? So just give you like 30 seconds to think on your own about that, and then I'm going to have you talk to each other. Thank you. All right, when you're ready, just turn to your partner. All right, if you can start wrapping up your thought. So I'm going to bring us back to here. I want you to hold on to some of those reflections because in about 5 minutes, we're going to have a general conversation about what you've been thinking about and what the implications are. Before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the implications for our education system. What is this whole child design thing? So our education system was not created based on this science. In fact, it was created based on faulty science used to justify racist and sexist and classist ideas about which children deserve a high-quality education. This is the foundation of so many of the inequities that we see in our system today that we are constantly trying to upend with these bits and pieces of changed practice. But what we need is a transformation of our education system. The good news is we're not starting with a blank piece of paper. There are a lot of really, really good positive practices that are already happening, and I would argue that a lot of them are probably happening in the special education space. So the Science of Learning and Development Alliance, which is a collaborative of these organizations you see on your screen, put together a framework, or these guiding principles, that hold a lot of the practices that already exist in the field, and put them in the context of this science. I'm going to walk you through these 5 areas of practice very quickly. You were sent, I believe, the paper that was the summary of these practices, so have a lot more detailed information about each of these. But when we talk about whole child design or educating the whole child, we actually know what that should look like. And we know that from the science and how it translates into these specific sets of practices. So the first thing we talk about is positive developmental relationships. We think of those like the fluoride in toothpaste. This is the active ingredient for anything you want to do with kids or frankly with people. It's the thing that makes that interaction effective. It's also the thing, we go back to our oxytocin and cortisol, right? Positive developmental relationships are the things that maximize the oxytocin that people are experiencing. Environments, the second is environments that are filled with safety and belonging. So our brains are prediction machines. We are constantly making order out of chaos. So if we're in a chaotic environment, it's really hard to focus on, say, reading a book. That's because our brains are busy doing stuff. But when we're in routines, I can brush my teeth and think about my agenda for the afternoon because it's a routine. So as much as we can create environments where that's possible, great. And added on to that is this sense of belonging. How do we create spaces that are co-created with young people, where their voices are heard, where they're active and engaged members in the development of that community? The next one is integrated supports. So because we all develop in our own context, we also are each on our own unique developmental pathway. And all of us need help at different moments with different skills and learning. So that idea of having tiered supports, right, doesn't just apply to those kids. It applies to all of us. We all need support at some times. So creating that non-stigmatizing understanding of integrated supports is essential to a whole child approach. The fourth one is skills, mindsets, and habits. And this is about being intentional about things like developing kids' executive functioning, their growth mindset, their perseverance, So that's part of a teacher, a facilitator's role in working with young people is how am I working with them to help them have the skills, mindsets, and habits they need in order to be successful. And that's not something that happens in SEL hour on Friday afternoon. It's something that is integrated into all of their experiences, whether it's math class, the playground, their interactions in the lunchroom, the school bus. How are we creating in all of these environments opportunities for kids to learn and practice those skills they absolutely need? And finally is around rich instructional experiences. So what do classrooms look like and how are kids interacting in classrooms so that the expectations for their success are clear, the supports are available, and they're being pushed to their greatest level of learning possible in that environment. Again, back to unique developmental pathways, that looks different for every child. So how do we create experiences where kids are in their zone of proximal development as often as possible by the way that we set up our classrooms and learning environments? So all of that together is an actually clear picture of what we need to do in order to do whole child design. That's what we're talking about when we educate the whole child. That's what so many of these initiatives are trying to do, I would argue in more or less piecemeal ways, but they actually are a coherent whole if we can understand them as that whole. Again, you have this summary of the design principles for schools, which provides a lot more detail. This is the summary. So there's a much bigger document that has a ton of tools available for you. So I want us to pause here and make connections. I know that you are always thinking about how does special education fit into all of these various initiatives that we're focused on. And I would argue based on what you've been talking about, I assume, what I just presented, that it really, really fits, that there is so much that you all have to share with the rest of the education world, because so much of this is kind of foundational to the way that you work with young people. So another opportunity to have a conversation. What I'm hoping now is instead of just in your pairs, but we can kind of pop that conversation out to all of us. That may be questions that you have for me or thinking about some of these questions. How does whole child design and the science grounding show up in special education? What are the opportunities to connect with other initiatives? What are the implications for your work as a committee? And then what more do you want to know? So I'm going to stop talking and let you guys talk to each other, ask me questions as you wish.
So we'll open the floor for commissioner comments, questions related to the work.
Just want to say thank you. It was very unexpected and a pleasant surprise to have kind of an interactive thing today like this. It was really great. And it really made me think about my two sons, one with disabilities and one that doesn't have them, and how the one without would be able to wait for the marshmallows. My son with disabilities, because of so many rich experiences he had with his educators, could wait too. You just have to be kind of reminded, and not even like, hey, you can't have it, but remember, if you wait a little longer, you'll get this. And over time has been able to do that on his own. So it was just really great. Thank you so much.
The conditions in which he can reveal his skills and talents.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. This is really, I've never seen that update on the marshmallow test either, so that was very powerful for me to watch. And like Commissioner Ruiz, I have two kids, and I would say that my younger one, who has the bigger disabilities, she probably too could do it because she has so many supports and has had so many accommodations that she can perform at that level. And I always think of how many kids don't have that. And so this is why I think we're all here, is to give everyone that opportunity to have that environment. And the other thing that struck me in this conversation was, relates back to yesterday's presentation with the barista at Four Seasons, that for the teachers on the ground, they're the ones we're asking to help create this environment and help create set up these relationships of trust. And I hope that that these teachers also are getting that same nurturing environment from their administrators, from their principals. And I think some of the training we heard about yesterday would help to foster that type of environment where they are all working at the Four Seasons and feeling like they have that same relationship from their higher ups that then they can now, set up for their students to help nurture that with the younger ones. So thank you.
So glad you said that, because this science about the way our brains work is true for all of us, not just kids, right? We all have that same cortisol oxytocin interaction. And we all know, right? You walk into a school environment and you can almost tell immediately what that school leadership is doing in order to nurture or not their school staff based on that environment almost immediately. So all of this is true. What you said, so important. We're asking a lot of teachers.
For me, I mean, it's focused on whole child, but similar to my comments yesterday, like scan forward 15 years after high school, so whole person and the lifelong lessons that we learn, and as we shared in our pair shares, I can make connections in areas where childhood experiences have formed my approach to different areas based on circumstances outside of my family's control, and so many students, may have an environment in school where they're able to have this, but home and just life may not be as aligned. And so how we can acknowledge all of the different circumstances that our students live in, whether it's, the high expectations and pressures for achievement, or families struggling with other circumstances like poverty or housing instability, and how the system of public education, our expectations and our awareness of all of these circumstances are required for us to unlock the potential that rests in each child. And it was really reinforced. It's not the kids, they're children. And so how can we create the integrated environments around not just the students, but the adults and the leaders who are tasked with creating those integrated structures and systems?
I can't remember what it was called yesterday, but when we were looking at the rubric and we went through, are these things aligned to our 5 goals? Maybe this is something we add somewhere in there in a sentence. Are we looking at the whole child as we go through those?
Any other implications for your committee that you'd want to call out? I'll just say it really loud. Any other implications that you would call out for your committee or for your connections to other initiatives?
I think the thing that struck me was the whole equity piece and really intentionally designing our systems and collaborating with other pieces of the whole system to ensure that we have equity across all of our students. A lot of the students that come into my system have fallen through the cracks for various reasons. And I've also been a foster parent, and having foster children from birth all the way through sibling sets of teenagers with various trauma and various abilities. Everybody has these unique needs, and really how do we meet all of these needs in a way that's healthy and in a way that's responsive to them so that they can really reach their potential. And so the equity piece really kind of resonated with me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was incredible. And Commissioner Wilkins used a phrase that's been running through my head, which is intentional design. And we've spoken a lot as a commission about intentionally designing our work, intentionally designing the language that we use, and really thinking of all students and not just siloing. This is UDL is great for students with disabilities. UDL is great for everybody, right? And professionally, I often have educators make requests such as, could you come in to a staff meeting and talk for 15 minutes about MTSS for students with disabilities? We have the general ed piece covered, but if you could tell us how to do it for students with disabilities, and I get to say, great news. Students with disabilities are general education students. And so I think it's so critical that in our discussions and in our advocacy, that we think, speaking to your question about all of these initiatives and things that are just being piled on, that we focus on what we know about the science of learning, what we know that works, and align all of those approaches and initiatives and be very intentional in our design of what we're doing and removing the things that we've been doing because it's part of that antiquated, racist, classist, sexist system of design and that we've all gotten used to, and thinking through the alignment of what we now know since we've updated our marshmallow test and we've learned more about the brain. And so that's what was running through my head, is breaking down those silos, being very intentional about how we speak about what students need with an equity lens and a holistic lens. So this was incredible. I really appreciated your presentation.
Call for any final commissioner comments, thoughts? No? Okay, seeing none, I'll wrap this up. I really think one of the implications for our work is one, not to lose sight of these components as we design and plan, and the opportunity we have to grapple with how we approach, whole child education and whole person work, and so that we are able to model not just hey, look, we've got posters on the walls or we have language, but just the experiences that we will grapple with to try and find integrated approaches to the conversations, the learning that's going to be required for our growth, and recognizing the experiences that we create in our commission and our work with our liaisons are part of, as we saw yesterday, the results pyramid. How do we create experience that deepen our learning, that inform our beliefs, that lead to actions and results, with the goal of meeting the needs of whole children across the state? And I was trying to envision, what would it look like if we accomplished our goal? Just think of the implications, not just for public education, just economically, for stability for families, for stability for educators, as we talk about the shortage of educators and think about cortisol overload. And so the more we are able to be intentional about our work and reflective about the lessons learned and the voices we're hearing from, and their shared experiences, I think the more powerful our advisement can be as a commission. Katie, thank you so much for your time and the effort to give us an experience to deepen our understanding and to impact how we approach our work going forward. Certainly a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I would leave you with this one other resource, which is the Turnaround Toolbox, which takes those guiding principles one step further into very specific practices and tools that educators can use. So if you want to dig in there a little bit, great. And then just one last thing is, because it would be confusing when you Google Turnaround for Children, they actually just merged with Arizona State University and now are called the Center for Whole Child Education. So just that note, if you start Googling, you're going to see something surprising. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the time to be here with you.
Thank you. And Katie, I'll just prepare you. I'm going to follow up with an email and ask, so who might be able to share their experiences and their journey related to whole child education that can highlight bright spots and lessons learned? All right. Thank you. With that, we will ask for this slide with instructions for public comment to be posted, and invite anyone in the room, any members of the public in the room who would like to make a comment. Seeing no members of the public wishing to make comment in the room. 15 more seconds online. Are there any public comments online?
There are no callers at this time.
Perfect. So we will conclude our conversation related to item 9, and we are moving into a break. We're a little behind time, but we had a pre-break before this session, so we will ask everyone to resume back at 11 a.m., and we will go into item 11, reports from the State Board and Director of State Special Schools, and then move into the next item, the Special Ed Director's Update. Thank you. We will resume our meeting with item 11, reports from the State Board of Education and the Director of Special Schools. Why don't we begin with Director Hilbrook Alman and her comments today? Or did we want to go in a different order? Why don't we begin with the Board of Education and then transition to the Director of State Special Schools?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you. I have a very short liaison report for the last state board meeting. One of the items we heard yesterday, which was the update on the California standard assessments and the LPAC, the English Language Proficiency Assessments. So I won't go into detail there. But I did want you to know that at the last meeting, we did have an update on chronic absenteeism. And the SBE provided guidance and direction to the California Department of Education regarding the chronic absentee indicator for the 2023 dashboard. And that's been of interest since the COVID pandemic because of obviously heightened percentage of students impacted by chronic absenteeism. And the other big update is really, which I'm sure you've heard in the media, is the fact that the math framework was adopted by the State Board of Education. And particularly, as you know, 4 years were devoted to the development of the new math framework. And particularly, the approved framework reflects revisions that were responsive to thousands and thousands of public comments and 2 public hearings, but that the focus of the new framework includes strategies to ensure equity and excellence in math for all students, connections to real world, to the real world through authentic examples, and allowing students to see themselves in the curriculum and math-related careers, and to really stimulate the deep thinking about math by sparking student curiosity and interest. So we look forward to the implementation of math, specifically in this context for our students with learning differences and disabilities, and to think about how we take something that's in guidance, but really translate it into meaningful experiences for our young people, and would appreciate your guidance on that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the update and report. Now we will transition to the Director of State Special Schools.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I want to start off with something a little bit different. I think the last time I shared my report,
which was in January, which was my first time as well coming to the meeting. It was a different commissioner and different commission, and I don't know how much you are familiar with the State Special Schools, so I want to take this opportunity to discuss with you what the State Special Schools Services Division really does. Often when you look at the state special schools, typically the focus is on 3 of our schools, but there are 3 diagnostic centers as well. But it's much more in depth than just that. People tend to forget that we work with low incidence groups. And this morning I had a conversation which made me realize what's important for all of you is to recognize is that there's intersectionality within deaf and VI communities, meaning when you meet an individual who happens to be deaf, what that could look like is exactly the same type. There's no stereotyping. There's categories. There's deafness, there's deaf blind, there's deaf plus. We just had an issue come up yesterday where some individuals were complaining with terminology of deaf plus and want that to be changed to deaf disabled. And they said, no, it should be a different term. Some say hard of hearing, some focus on hearing level, some individuals say hearing loss. There is a huge variety, and we serve all of them. And none of them are excluded. And with our VI community, VI, we don't say blind, we say VI because it's more specialized and rather more broad. With the blind community, they prefer the term VI. Or some people will say I'm blind. Some will say I'm visually impaired. Some will say I'm fully blind. Not all are. Some have low vision and low vision needs. In the classroom, if you can imagine a student in the classroom, they may have a different set of needs. My role with the State Special School is to serve all school districts. That ensures they all have an understanding of serving the individual student and their need, not looking at them as a whole group. And in the spirit of IDEA and the IEP plans, IDEA emphasizes individual, and that's in conflict a little bit with the huge inclusion conversation and concept of inclusion and what that actually means and looks like for deaf or VI students. So keep that in mind as we discuss today. We have 3 schools again and 3 diagnostic centers. And they are specialized, but they serve all special ed students, except for our deaf and VI visually impaired students. Those are not included with our diagnostic centers. Diagnostic centers are open to everyone. Our 3 diagnostic centers used to be called boarding schools for the multi-handicapped students. That was the original term and intention many, many years ago. And of course they changed it, and they changed the term to diagnostic centers, which we currently use today because they provide assessments. Those assessments means that if a school district needs to, they can request if they're struggling to provide full services or their IEP teams feel that they need to have a more in-depth assessment, they'll refer them to the diagnostic centers, and then they'll do a comprehensive assessment. Now, our diagnostic centers have all kinds of specialities. They really are the experts outstanding in their field. And if something new comes up, they go immediately to get that in-depth training, and they're funded by California Department of Education to ensure that they get that training. And then that influences the work they do with school districts, especially with our regional areas, our rural areas that don't have those resources. They ensure that they are servicing those areas. Now, SB 210 legislation is related to DRDP. And DRDP is a very widely focused thing in special ed, but SB 210 is more focused on language milestones for our deaf and hard of hearing. And often when a child is born and identified as having a hearing level at a certain point, they get lost in the system. So there needs to be someone to follow up and track their language development to ensure the school districts need to report that they are analyzing and assessing that child every year from birth to the age of 5. That's the purpose of SB 210. Now there's 3 schools. We have CSB, that's California School for the Blind, that serves the entire state of California. People fly and live there during the week and fly home on the weekends. Now, CSB itself is actually more of a resource center, and it provides resources. They're not a school in the sense of school. Now, the kids do go to school, but they get a certificate of completion. If they want a diploma from high school, then they have to enroll in one of the local schools in Alameda County, and they are mainstreamed. So they go between CSB and that high school and are mainstreamed to earn their diploma. CSB works very, very closely within the Fremont School District. And we also have a short-term program, meaning that some students may need occupational modality services and training. So they will come to the school, stay at CSB for 6 weeks for that short-term training, and then sent back to their home school district and get more resources within their home school district. Now, CSD Fremont serves 49 counties in all of Northern California in a variety of different schools, from Eureka all the way down to the most southern point of Fresno. Riverside serves 12 counties, but mind you, those are extremely large counties because it's in Southern California, everywhere from Bakersfield to Chula Vista County to Yuma County, the city of Yuma. Now, before I continue talking about state special schools and our priorities, I think a big challenge to recognize and my goal to pursue as director is to educate and help everyone understand, don't forget us. The state special schools are often left behind and forgotten, most pertaining to our legislative bills that go through the state. Frequently, those bills mention the school county offices of education, school districts, LEAs, etc., charter schools, but they forget the state special schools. We're also a special ed school, but we are a general ed school, and we need the funding that school districts are receiving. State special schools currently don't receive the same funding, and that's our important priority, is to remind them to add us to those legislative bills. So as they're having those discussions, then we will support them, but we need them to support us as well. And often they say, no, you already have those resources, and we remind them that we don't. It becomes a huge challenge that we need to address this year to ensure that we are being made aware of out in the community with the legislators. Now, our outreach services, Ed Code very clearly emphasizes that there are 3 schools that are to provide outreach services all over the state of California, and more students are not getting the services that they need within their school districts because they have a hard time finding qualified DHH teachers, itinerant teachers. It's incredibly challenging. And it has become a big issue that we've talked about. With distance learning, we've talked about if schools can do that, maybe they can join from their home school area, maybe do some distance learning. That's a conversation that's been coming up a lot more recently. And we are trying to find a way to make it happen, but it becomes challenging because educational interpreters, we have a very severe shortage, and some of them, frankly, are just not qualified. And I need to reemphasize that many of them in our educational interpreters are assessing below the 4.0 minimum considered. Now, remind you that it's 4.0 is considered 80% qualified. So if you tell your children, okay, you can go to school, but you're only going to get 80% of what the teacher says, that's unacceptable. but that is the current legal requirement for our educational interpreters. I would prefer the maximum of a 5.0, but the school districts are struggling to find anyone, so they're putting someone in with a 3.2 or a 3.4, and they have no choice. There's no alternative. It's become a huge school concern for the State Board of Education, as well as for CDE. And so we will be setting up an educational interpreter task force to focus on addressing this issue, to figure out, to come up with a better system and solution. We need systemic change in this area. Finally, our School for the Deaf at Fremont currently has our superintendent position vacant, so I am the interim superintendent as well as the director of the state special schools. And I am making the best as I can out of that whole situation. What's interesting is if you know anyone that's interested in applying, I would encourage them to do so. Our 3 state special schools are very proud, and we would love to have each and every one of you come and visit our schools. You are always welcome to come visit one of our 3 schools. They would be happy to give you a tour and show you around and help you understand the services they provide and the education they provide. A reminder, our 2 deaf schools and our blind school are very different in the sense that they serve ages 3 to age 22, and they have general services, general education, as well as special ed. Most people think they're solely special ed, but they're not. Our students at our deaf schools graduate with their high school diploma. Some go off to work, some go straight to college, some go to vocational training. We have a variety of students like any other general ed high school. So thank you. Any questions, any wonderings, ponderings? I hope I can answer your questions.
As the executive director in Riverside County, I will say, first of all, I think the update on the person first language and DHH Plus, because that is a conversation currently happening out in the field. Also, we are very short staffed in our DHH and VI programs. Right now, we are down to orientation and mobility specialist and have reached out across the state. So everything you're saying, I totally agree with and feel the struggle for, and again, with the interpreting, we have over 9 DHH programs that we run, and the interpreters, the shortages and the needs. So yes, being a part of that, I would be welcoming, and I'd like to be a part of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a very informative update. I would love to take you up on the invitation to visit the schools and learn more. And also very much appreciate calling out the need to be, we've talked a lot about intentions today, to be intentional when we're having our conversations about inclusion, and that it doesn't inadvertently get misrepresented as full general ed placement all the time is the best thing for all students, and really recognizing that we need to focus on that continuum and expand inclusive practices for students in whatever way that looks to them. My background is as a special day class teacher. My son was in a special day class. It was the best place for him. So thank you for that reminder. And I will do a better job of making sure that I'm making that visible in our conversations about inclusion, and appreciate all of the tremendous amount of work that you're doing on behalf of our students.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I agree with my fellow commissioners. It was so informative. I just want to ask again, what was the position that you would encourage people to apply for?
Oh, yes. Our site superintendent for the California School for the Deaf in Fremont.
Thank you.
And, you know, it's a huge challenge currently because the Bay Area, the cost of living there is atrocious. And we're state special schools. So their income is based on the state rate, not the school district's rate. So just a little food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laibach Aman. My daughter is hard of hearing, as you've heard me say over and over again, especially today. And she's verbal, and she actually does hear a lot with her hearing aids, but she still needs an interpreter. And when she's in the gen ed classroom, we have relied on interpreting for her. And oftentimes people don't realize why a student who can speak and who seems to be able to hear a lot needs an interpreter in the classroom. And like Dr. Laibach Aman demonstrated, if you only catch 80%, we don't allow that for most anything in for our students. And so she relies on an interpreter to fill in the gaps for what she's missing or mishearing. And if the interpreter is missing 80%, then those numbers just drop and drop and drop. And so when we talked about giving students an environment where they can pick the right marshmallow or wait for the marshmallow, we're trying to create that environment for many kids. This is an important part of their just daily living and their daily school lives. And so I'm so grateful for you for having this task force, because this has been an ongoing issue. The teacher shortage that we are having across the state in every area is exponentially challenging, with the deaf and hard of hearing, teachers of the deaf who are qualified teachers of the deaf, interpreters, and so on. So thank you for your work in that area, because our kids really need it. The other thing I would also encourage everyone to visit the schools. We live a couple hours away from Fremont, our closest school for the deaf. And to be honest, if we lived closer, we probably would have sent our daughter there, because it was like you're saying, Commissioner Notch, sometimes, the least restrictive environment is not the gen ed classroom or the mainstream classroom. And so for students who their disability is related to communication, and if you are not able to communicate with your peers, being in that classroom and getting the same instruction is not helpful where you're not developing socially. And as I mentioned before, my daughter just went to this camp for deaf and hard of hearing kids, and that sense of pride that I saw, that's something that I wish she'd had every day and every school day that she's had. And so, we would love more schools for the deaf, and of course it's impossible, and it's still a low incidence disability. But there's something about that environment. It's we've gone for family weekends, we've gone for school field trips where they've done performances, and I would take her and some other friends from our area to go travel down and visit, and it's very empowering, and it's a very special place in the services and the resources that these schools offer. And these we also use the diagnostic center. I just take advantage of everything we've got. They're amazing supports for our kids. So any families who are watching, I would encourage, if you have a child who's deaf or hard of hearing, to look at the resources. They have some online that you can access and then learn more about. And then again, also as has been encouraged here, we hope that the districts take advantage of the resources and supports that the professional expertise that they can offer to our schools, so that we can best replicate that environment that they have at these special state special schools as best we can in a local districts. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for the presentation. And just to piggyback off of what Commissioner Oyakawa stated, yes, we do reach out to the state schools for related services, and it's very informative when we have to. I know at least in my district, in my department, we've had them come out and also speak to us about like some of the different things about deaf and hard of hearing students and visually impaired, and some of the ways we could help our school teams collaborate and understand the needs and how to work with them and how to be able to all work again collaboratively. So being part of that team process and looking at the child from a whole child perspective instead of from the disability, and just saying this is what it is. How do we include them? What do we do? What are we do as team members, just from class time to socializing during nutrition, recess, lunch, and making sure it's a very well-developed experience for them. So thank you. Appreciate your collaboration.
I believe there's a comment from Commissioner Snipes online.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much. I want to make sure that she's able to see or hear.
Yes, we're able
I can see you. Yes, thank you for checking.
I wanted to make sure everybody saw. I just want to say thank you for mentioning all of the areas that are supported by Fremont. I live in Eureka. I know students who come from Eureka to Fremont to go to school. We live hours and hours away from there. And the students that go to Fremont are very young. And it just made me think about the people who work in Fremont are not just teachers, they're caregivers. And just thinking about them being left out of a lot of the things and a lot of the language, it's so important to include our special schools. They're not just our students' teachers, they're our students' caregivers. And when we're talking about the whole child, they are such a deep part of that. So I just thank you so much for bringing that up and bringing it back to our attention. And I think I would love to see Fremont because I know we have kids that go there, and I know that they care deeply about their students. So I always appreciate hearing from you about the special schools. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Liaisons, thank you so much. I always learn more information each time you share, like the history of the diagnostic centers, that wasn't aware of that. And so thank you for sharing that information, and also underscoring what is foundational to special education is that all students enroll in schools and receive services from categorical programs. Categorical programs should not define who our students are or how we fund the schools that they attend. And so I appreciate your underscoring of the needs of our students and the systems alignment and integration, and how the misalignment creates challenges, although the intent was certainly positive to create our special schools, but we need to ensure that they are resourced in a way that meets the needs of all students and provides the sufficient capacity. So please keep us aware of how we can support those efforts as a commission, recognizing we have no authority as it relates to funding, but as we advise around needs of the state, how we can amplify the needs of the state special schools and by extension, the communities that are being served there. And commissioners, I appreciate the recognition of the least restrictive environment isn't always general ed. And what I heard is, and what I believe, the loss of community for sake of placement in one area has detrimental effects on students that are lifelong. And so again, as we focus on K-12 or birth to 22 education, expanding our gaze beyond that last year with public education and the impacts that we set students up for that will be lifelong. So as always, it's a pleasure to hear from you. I would ask the team at CDE to please share the slide for public comments. And ask any public commenters in the room to begin lining up. And Dr. Liaisons, if there are any closing comments you'd like to share?
Not really. Just one last final thing, I guess. What you mentioned, Commissioner Toston, is there's a big list for everyone to keep in mind. Often, when you meet a deaf person, or a hard of hearing person, whatever the case may be, and you don't have an interpreter, that's fine. With technology today, we can look at captions. Zoom has captions. I did share a story recently with one of my team members quite a little bit ago. And I said, okay, fine. We do have captions. That's great. Sure. I'll read the captions. You turn the sound off and you read the captions as well. So we're both getting the exact same message. And they went, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so have an understanding of the environment and the background. It's critical to have the emotion in the tone of voice, the affect, how things are said is just as valuable as what's said. And interpreters and how they interact with all of you on a personal level, the way they write in text is not enough. So I want to thank all of you for your time, and I look forward to a great year with everyone. Thank you.
I see one member of the public in the room making comment, and then we will move to online.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon again, commissioners. I want to thank Dr. Leibach-Amen for the update. I want to share that we've had numerous meetings now where you've attended with our executive committee for State SELPA, so we're very appreciative of that ongoing partnership as we try to collaborate closer with our state schools. On a personal level, I want to state that I'm very excited to hear about the task force on interpreting. Have a large deaf hard of hearing program within my SELPA from infant all the way up to 12th grade, and that is a challenge that we see as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing the recommendations, not only on how we can sustain interpreters, but also get them prepared through those preparation programs. Also want to share that our VI team from our SELPA graciously was extended an opportunity to go up to the State School for the Blind, and I'm going to be part of that team going up August 31st to see some of the practices at the State School for the Blind so we can try to implement those in our SELPA VI program as well. So thank you for the ongoing partnership and support. And also want to mention she was April of 2023, flew down to San Diego and presented to everyone in our membership. So that partnership's very strong, and we're very thankful for that.
Thank you so much for those comments. Are there any online public comments? I think we may need to post this slide.
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to item 12, the Special Ed Director's Report.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you so much for having me here. For those of you, I always assume everyone knows who I am because I've been around so long, but my name is Shiyloh Duncan-Becerril. I am the Interim Director of Special Education. My permanent role is the Associate Director of Special Education, which means I am over all of data, all of monitoring, and the special education system of support. And so we were going to be joined also by our Deputy Superintendent, Sarah Neville-Morgan, today. However, she had a pressing matter that pulled her away, and so I'm going to also be covering her topics as well. So our my discussion is sort of two parts. One discusses our search for a new director, and the other part is going to be more of a traditional director's report on things that are happening within the division and our work with the state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the search, maybe provide some time for questions because there is a role that ACSE is going to play in the search for the new director, and then I'll move into the more traditional items. So just kind of a little pause, ensuring that the commissioners have time to ask questions. So as you know, our director, Heather Calamise, left her position as the director of special education at the end of June. And so since July, we have been searching for a new director, and the search is ongoing. The position, just for folks who are aware, I am acting as the interim director. I've been pretty transparent throughout the state that I am not applying to be the director. I have been working on the monitoring piece and implementing that has been my baby for the last couple of years, and it is still just not ready for me to be without it yet. So I'll continue to work in my current role and still come to the commission and provide presentations and updates on our work and the monitoring, but I still need to continue this very important project so that we can have a permanent monitoring system that will last a long time. I think the changes that have occurred in our monitoring in the last 5 to 6 years have created such a disruption in the work for LEAs that if I were to move on to a different position now, it would potentially disrupt that work. So just so that folks are aware. We had the position announcement closed on August 11th, and we actually received a high number of applicants. So it's very exciting to have that. So we did extend the application deadline, and we also made some changes to the nature of the position is now an exempt position. But there are steps now that are part of that that are going to require us to work closely with you all in the appointment of that director. So the next steps will be to review the applicants and select our top candidates for interviews. And in reviewing the applications, we'll be looking for individuals who understand both the state and federal requirements for special education. That's very important, who are able to work closely with our partners across the street, the legislature, the Department of Finance, our partners in other agencies, which is a big part of the work, and an individual who is able to work closely with families, students, and our educational partners. So we're looking for someone who can really work across a lot of different pots of the work. So it's a challenge, but I'm hoping we have somebody in our pool of candidates who can do all of those things. We are also looking for someone who has leadership experience. This is a very large division to manage, about 165 staff. And so working through that and understanding how to work with lots of different personalities and lots of different types of work is going to be an important part of the position. So once we've selected our top candidate, we will bring that basically their package for approval to the advisory commission. As an exempt position, the advisory commission must provide its recommendation on the appointment. And so it will need to come before a meeting that has a quorum, and the appointment will need to be voted on. Now, the way that that is going to work, I think, is still a little bit up in the air, meaning I don't know if the person will come here or if we'll simply bring our recommendation with their package here. I think we're still working on our personnel and our human resources division to see what that would look like. But it does need to come before the commission for a vote. If approved, those minutes will then go as part of the package over to the governor's office for their final approval. So what does that look like in terms of timing? We will work closely with our educational partners. We're hoping to have some of our educational partners as part of the potential interviewing process to find the strongest candidate that we can. And we hope to bring the candidate before the board before the commission in October. So the issue for us is often identifying a quorum. So if we were to do an emergency meeting, we'd have to bring everybody here in the middle of September. I think that would be really difficult to do. So we're going to be shooting for the October meeting. And then once that happens, then we'll send the package over to the governor's office. So we're hoping to have a candidate in place ready to start by the early parts of November. Now that's if everything goes according to plan and we have an amazing candidate in this group of candidates. We hope that that's what will occur. So I did want to pause quickly for questions because I know this is a different role than the commission has played in the past.
Just first want to say thank you for your work, and I'm a bit sad you're not applying, but I'm so glad you're staying on top of the hard work that you're doing now. So we appreciate that. I just had a quick question. What did you mean by exempt position?
So this is a position that is outside of the state service classifications. Like, for example, we would have classifications within state service. And then one of them that's often in the director positions and above is what's known as a career executive assignment. So this position would be outside of that and outside of the civil service classifications. and it's appointed typically by like a governing agency, like the governor's office.
Does that mean no pay for overtime?
You'll find that many of our positions have no pay for overtime, including the one that I'm sitting in right now. There is not that. One of the benefits of having it in an exempt position is that we can increase the salary. Because as you know, one of the challenges that we face in recruiting leadership in the department is that our salaries don't often match the salaries that individuals are able to receive in a local school district or through an advocacy agency. And so because of that, it just makes it very challenging for us to find folks who are willing to come to the state. Because, people have lives that they need to support, families, where they live. But we were able to increase the salary by making it an exempt position. Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to go on to the rest of more of a traditional director's report. A couple of things that are going to be coming. So we are going to have that action item on the October agenda, but we will also have our more traditional action item on the October agenda, which is the state performance report and the annual performance report, which is an action item that comes before the commission that we present, and it is a very data heavy item. So I would obviously request that it be right after lunch, since that worked so well for everyone yesterday. And I'll be presenting that item around our annual performance report. We do need to have the commission's support so that we can move on to the State Board of Education, who will provide the final approval. A couple of other updates I wanted to provide. We are continuing to implement our compliance and improvement monitoring system. Our compliance and improvement monitoring system does not follow an academic year. It follows a traditional calendar year. That is purposeful so that districts can create plans and then implement those plans on a school year basis. So most districts are in the process of working on their plans and completing on their plans if they're in steps 1, 2, or 3. If they're in steps 4, they're in the implementation portion of their plan. And we are pairing them with our partners of like SIP, the Supporting Inclusive Practices project, our ACSE project, which I don't know if folks are aware of that acronym, but that is our Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center. And so we're very lucky to have been able to fund a specific technical assistance center that will act like an umbrella for all of our early childhood special education work. So that's very exciting. And we also recently funded this year a new set of special education leads. Mindy talked about that yesterday. All of those folks will work together in our compliance improvement monitoring process to help districts improve. And I think when I was here last time, I talked a lot about the SIM and how it is kind of like an integrated healthcare model where we have individuals who are ill, our LEAs who need a little bit more help, and some of them have small issues like tennis elbow, and some of them need the ICU, and we are referring them out to specialists to do the work. And so we're excited to see that continue to move forward. And then one of the other things you're going to hear coming out of the department this fall is that we are implementing a redesign of our data collection. So when we moved in 2019 from our CASEMIS, that was our special education individualized data collection, into CalPads, where we moved all of our data into a statewide longitudinal data system, that resulted in a lot, I think, of growing pains and understanding how the practices at districts worked and how our data systems didn't always collect them the way we wanted them to. And so we're implementing this fall a redesign of those data collection tables. And so you might be hearing from districts like, this is working, or this isn't working, or it's new and it's difficult. So that is something that is kind of on the horizon. But we are working and holding lots of trainings throughout the state we are holding our traditional road shows, our trainings that we do throughout the state to train LEAs, county offices of education, charter schools, and SELPAs on these changes. Our team has worked really hard to listen to districts and schools and county offices about how data lives in the district and how we can collect it so it really tells the story of our students. For those of you who don't know, or were not here when I'm here, was here prior to my position as the associate director. I spent 9 years as the data administrator for special education. So I did all the collection and all the data reporting. I had a team, it wasn't just me by myself, for students with disabilities in California. So I'm highly connected to this work, and I believe with 10,000 schools, around 900,000 students with disabilities, the only way we can understand what's going on in our schools and districts is with high quality data. So hoping that that will work through. In some more good news, we have a family empowerment center in every region of the state, with one exception, Lake County. We recently issued a request for applications for a family empowerment center in Lake County, and it closed. We issued that on the 31st, and it will close shortly. So once we have Lake County represented, we will have a family empowerment center in every region, which was very exciting. That was a part of legislation that passed a few years ago, or a couple of years ago. I do have a couple updates on some pieces around the high school, the alternate diploma. As you know, there was a change in education code that allowed for a alternate diploma and an alternate pathway. The law went into effect on June 30th, and we had it amended this last year on July 10th with SB 114. And one of the biggest changes is that will impact students starting in 9th grade in 22-23. So students who started 9th grade last year will be the first cohort of students who will be eligible for this alternative diploma. I think that was difficult, but I think important, because it caused a lot of questions in the field about whether or not we had everything in place to ensure that children could get an alternate diploma. So I think it'll be really helpful for those children. In order to be eligible for this alternate diploma, they have to take the alternate assessment. So that's really important. And they have to complete standards aligned coursework, right? So that is a little bit different. Now, I do want to note that this is a little bit different from the alternate pathways, right? So there's an alternate diploma and there's an alternate pathways. If you all would like to have more discussion about the alternate pathways in the future, I think we can definitely come in. I know Chair-elect Turner from the SELP organization has worked very closely with Heather DeFeed, who is probably one of our statewide experts in the space, to come in and talk more about the pathway and how it's working, along with our CDE staff. But this is different. The alternate diploma is a little bit different from the alternate pathway. And so one of the most important things that I want folks to understand about the alternate diploma is that it does not terminate services. So that's really important, because typically a student who receives a regular high school diploma would mean they are no longer eligible for special education services. Students who receive this alternate diploma are still eligible, so they are not exited from special education. So that they can go along to things like career technical education or training or transition services to continue their workforce preparedness. So, and then my final update around the IEP implementation, we've talked a little bit about that. As you know, we are required to collect data around IEP implementation. And we finished our first statewide data collection this year. It ended in July, although we've had some districts who've struggled to get it in, so we've extended the deadline. Excuse me. I feel like I talk all day long, but maybe I just feeling a little dry in this room. So we collected the data. We saw some districts who are finishing their submissions. And I think overall it was a success. We did have some learning in that process. One of the biggest pieces that we learned was around our small LEAs, that the capacity to do this data collection just didn't exist as easily in our small LEAs. Many of them are still using paper logs and things like that. And so to collect this data in a format was really complicated for them. So we're looking into alternatives to how we can collect this data for our small LEAs, and that would include our charter schools as well. And so is there an alternate if you have a district who's a special education director and a principal and a bus driver? How can they collect this data? And then finally, oh no, I think I'm good. I'm almost done. And then, so I think that's kind of where we're at. We're going to look towards it next year. The one thing we did just really want to encourage folks to understand is that this is not about one student or one teacher. This is about overall what's happening in the district. We did get reports that districts were telling teachers and families that students couldn't go on field trips or attend recess or go to gym or go to practices because they had to get their services minutes. And that is not the message we are sending. And that is not the message that is a hill I will sit on as long as I sit in this position. And this is the thing I will say to the court if we are ever asked. That is not the purpose of this data collection. It is to understand whether there are systemic issues in a district that are causing students not to receive services. So anyone who's listening, continue to listen. Do not keep kids from their field trips and music ceremonies and those kinds of things. So that's all I had.
Thank you so much for the report. I will scan the dais for comments, questions.
Sorry, I can't stop. Thank you for taking on this additional role. I can't believe you're doing both. So one, I wanted to thank you for that. The alternative diploma and alternative pathway, I would love to get, I don't know if this is part of agenda building or I'm kind of covering both, but I would love to learn more about how that's going to happen. And I appreciate your clarifying. I forgot that these are two different diplomas, and because they have almost the same name, it's really confusing. And as a parent out here, I actually haven't heard about it, except for what I get up here. So I'm wondering how that information is going to get out to the families and the kids so that they know that there are these other options, especially for those who are concerned about losing services after 18. And then again, for the alternate pathway to know that these students are now able to get another path to a diploma. The other question I had, I don't know if it's, it wasn't one of the topics you covered, but I was thinking of data, and I know that there's a concern with a lot of families where I live about students with disabilities getting chronic truancy letters or absenteeism letters, and we'd received some in the past, not for like, and they're very, if you've ever gotten one, it's a really scary thing to get. And when you have a student with disabilities who's absent for medical reasons or even like anticipating, like with the pandemic, and I know we made a lot of exceptions during the pandemic for absences and whatnot, but I'm just wondering, and I don't know if this is actually your area because it's not we're collecting information, but it's also the response that the parents are getting for when they keep their kids home from school. And I wondered, like, if we could learn more about how the truancy law applies to students with disabilities, how districts and families can work so that we're not getting these scary letters that are threatening, to many families. And often we don't have, we're told, oh, don't worry about it. You just ignore that one. That's just the state requires us to send it. And we're like, okay. And so I guess I would like to learn more. Maybe that's a future thing to add to the agenda.
And I would say, we don't, in my division, sort of oversee that part of it, but we do have folks who kind of work around the chronic absenteeism data, what it looks like, what it means, who's it for, and we can definitely have those kinds of conversations. I do agree they're scary. I had my son on independent study last year and they coded him incorrectly and we got these letters about how truant he was. But that data is really important because it does also feed into the dashboard. I think understanding that chronic absenteeism is a factor that can sort of help push districts in differentiate assistance is important.
And I guess I wondered too if that information, when it's used, are the schools able to use that and not just say, oh, it's just something we have to send up to the state, but also say, hey, why is this kid absent? Is this part of like child find, or is this a way to help identify students who maybe need other supports? And so I just would like to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. Very informative. Appreciate it. For the IEP implementation, I know that y'all just got the data in and I'm sure are in the process of crunching it. And I'm curious about what the sort of longer term next steps are in terms of either circling back with LEAs and then providing us some sort of high level overview of what you find through that.
Yeah, so for the IEP implementation, it's going to be a factor within our monitoring system, meaning it is a factor that is going to be used to determine which districts are going to be in targeted monitoring and which districts are going to be in intensive monitoring. So it is not a compliance item that we're using currently. What it will be used for is to say, hey, this district has issues in this area, along with other factors that puts them into these categories that requires them to look more deeply at their practices and processes.
One follow-up question. I know that since this is the first time we're collecting this kind of data, I'm sure you're getting a lot of just like really interesting information around the state of service implementation around the state. And I'm curious if you will be able to share some of that information with us.
Yeah, I think I would love to. I mean, obviously, we're seeing a lot of variation in how districts collect this data and who puts the information in. So I've had lots of conversations with our partners over at the California Teachers Association because there's a lot of questions about who puts this information in, who collects it, who tracks it, who ensures that it's valid and reliable. So I think that's where we're seeing a lot of variability across the state. But happy to come back when we have more information to talk more about it.
I had a very similar question about learnings coming out of IEP implementation. In my context in a county office, we have our own school programs. Not all of the services are provided by our providers, but it counted in our accuracy percentage if there were district providers, PTs, physical therapists, occupational therapists going in. And the same on the other side when we have our related service providers who are going to itinerantly serve districts. So there are some funky things that were happening with that. And so that was my question too, is will there be an opportunity for learnings, recommendations? So that was a very similar question.
We're going to collect the data annually. So I think as we move forward to collecting it next year, that's some of the pieces that we're going to be communicating to the field.
Thank you, everyone. Seeing no additional comments on the dais, we'll invite members of the public wishing to make comments to begin lining up. And while they're lining up, can I ask for the slide for online public commenters, and we'll let that slide sit for about 30 seconds, and then we'll move to in the room comments, and then to anyone who's online. And also, I just want to check with any commissioners online if there are any comments you'd like to make at this time. There don't appear to be any. We will call for comments in the room.
All right. Good afternoon again. Scott Turner, SELPA Administrators of California. Just want to thank Shiyloh for the thorough report and update. I think it's evidence of all the work that CDE is doing, as well as all the work that's happening out in the field in LEAs. When we think about IEP implementation, SIM, and now the alternate diploma pathway, there's a lot of work going on out there, and we're appreciative of any guidance. I know there were some changes to the alternative diploma pathway in the trailer bill, and so any additional guidance or FAQs related to that is really helpful for the field. I think think it gets to the comment by many of the commissioners of trying to get that information out publicly as well, so that we could be preparing and making those decisions as appropriate. It was mentioned Heather DeFeedy. There's also many others that are involved in that work. It was mentioned about Heather DeFeedy. There's many others in the field that are collaborating in the work around alternative diploma pathways. SECO has been partners in that. We've been working very closely, and there's others from other associations. So we're committed to trying to implement that and look at those current cohort of students that were ninth graders in 22-23. So thank you to the Commission.
Thank you. There appear to be no other public comments in the room. Checking for public comments online.
There are no callers online.
Thank you. And to those manning the cameras, how we just facilitated that with the slide and the dual camera, let's plan to do that for public comments going forward. I think it makes it a lot more efficient and facilitates the information sharing as well as allowing us to move forward with comments in the room. So thank you, everyone. With that, we will conclude item 12 and move into lunch. And so enjoy your meals. Coming back, we will be in study sessions for committee and for members of the public who are following along. Please note that these discussions will not be online, as we will be breaking up into smaller groups. I believe Leg and Policy is going to have time, as well as the Gold Award. We'll be meeting to discuss next steps with the Gold Award. And we will be having some generic conversations, finalizing our committee and liaison assignments. We will follow all the rules of Bagley-Keene for anyone else monitoring that as well. So with that, we will transition to lunch and then into study sessions, and then we will convene back on camera at 1:45 for our presentation from the Learning Policy Institute. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the public portion of the meeting. We are very excited to continue and deepen our learning related to community schools. Just by refresher, the Community Schools Partnership Program represents the single most largest investment in transformative practices in the history of the state of California, and we are as a commission have prioritized our support and tracking of this conversation, as well as deepening our understanding as we recognize the potential positive impact of recreating our public school environments to better meet the needs of all students. And so we are very pleased today to have two presenters from the Learning Policy Institute to share with us their learnings from a case study related to the Oakland Unified School District and their full community school model. And so Sarah and Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. We will turn the time over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Oh, there's two of me. I don't know if, is that right? I see myself on two screens, but that's fine.
You're displayed on single screens in the room, so that just may be on your end. So let us know if...
One of hers in the stream and one of hers live.
Okay. All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Clevin. I'm a senior researcher at the Learning Policy Institute. And I'll let Danny, my colleague, introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danny Espinosa. I'm a researcher and policy advisor at the Learning Policy Institute. It's a pleasure to be with you all today.
And Danny is going to go ahead and share a screen so that we can kick off our presentation. All right. I'm seeing that just fine. I hope everyone else is too, but please let us know if there's any issues with the screen share. So yeah, again, thank you so much for inviting us to join you today. Danny and I are here from the Learning Policy Institute. For anyone who's not familiar, LPI is a research and policy organization based in Palo Alto and in Washington, D.C. Our CEO is Linda Darling-Hammond, And we do research and policy work in 4 different areas: whole child education, educator quality, early childhood education, and equitable resource and access. This presentation really falls in the whole child education bucket. My understanding when I talked to Chair Tostin was that you had another sort of panel discussion or speaker who was dedicated just to whole child education. So I think that would set you up really well for this presentation, since community schools are certainly focused on the whole child educational approaches. Thanks, Danny. All right, so let me just tell you where we're headed. We'll do a little bit of level setting and discuss what community schools are, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Danny will provide some policy context for California, which Chair Tostin already referenced. So we'll focus on the California Community Schools Partnership Program, what that state investment looks like. And then I'll present some findings from LPI's case study of Oakland's Community Schools Initiative, and we'll end by just spotlighting a few resources on LPI's website, because there are many, but I think there are some in particular that might be useful to the Commission. And then I hope that we have some time for Q&A at the end. My understanding is that we'll do a presentation, and then there's some time at the end for questions and public comment. I believe that's right. All right, so I'm going to read this definition for community schools. Community schools partner with local organizations and family members to integrate a range of supports and opportunities for students, families, and the community in order to promote students' physical, social, emotional, and academic well-being. And I just want to highlight a few things. So you can see that there's a whole child education emphasis here. Community schools are focused on all kinds of child development, whether that's academic, social, behavioral, physical. And we should really think about community schools as an approach rather than a specific model. Community schools will look different from school to school because all communities look different. And we'll talk, I would say, even though they look different, they all sort of draw on common features, sometimes referred to as pillars. Danny will talk about that a little bit more. So I'll stop there and pass the mic to him.
Thank you, Sarah. So before jumping into some of the research findings from Oakland Unified, just want to provide a little bit of policy context around California Community Schools Partnership Program, or CCSPP. And as Chair Tostin noted, it is a massive investment that the state has made to support community schools. And in fact, the largest investment of any state to support community schools at $4.1 billion over 2 budget years, and with plans to spend those funds through the 2030-2031 school year. And so these dollars in particular are going out through planning and implementation grants to schools with a requirement for a local match of 1/3, as the slide notes. And importantly, the strategy is viewed explicitly as an equity strategy. So one way that's sort of realized is that with the distributions of these grants are targeted to schools serving high proportions of unduplicated students, right? So students from low-income backgrounds, English language learners, students in foster care. And importantly for California's approach, and a few other states have done this as well, New York as one example.
I'm
but
sorry.
the state has, oh, please.
Just wanted I'm sorry, I forgot one logistical note. Because you're presenting online and we have live interpreters in the room, if I could ask you to slow down just a little bit as you're presenting so that they can keep pace and everyone can access the communication. Thank you.
My apologies to interpreters. Thank you for that clarification, and for anyone relying on the interpreters as well. Sorry. But yes, as to continue, the state has also made an important investment in a transformational assistance infrastructure to support community schools. So that's led principally by the State TA Center, which is housed at the Alameda County Office of Education. But there's also 8 regional technical assistance centers across the state. And lastly, from a kind of a grants perspective, County Office of Education that have multiple LEAs and schools receiving implementation or planning grants are also eligible for additional funding to support implementation. And as Sarah's remarks will note, the role of districts and county offices to support implementation is an important one. And so the structure of California's program reflects that. Sarah noted sort of the definition of community schools. I just wanted to add a couple additional points from particularly the perspective of the CCSPP framework. And that's to highlight that community schools are also viewed as a school improvement strategy, right? It's one where districts are working closely with teachers, students, and families, right? There's an intentional emphasis on partnering with community agencies, with local government, and early child education providers, for example. And importantly, one thing we kind of hear in the course of our work frequently is there's a view that community schools, are all about wraparound services, right? Or if you provide wraparound services, then you're a community school. And just wanted to note that that's an important element of community schools, but it is sort of only one of the 4 pillars as California has kind of defined them. So you can see that reflected in element number 2 here, the integrated student supports. But also important are the other pillars, right? So things like expanded learning time, whether that be in the form of after school, sometimes weekend, but also summer learning opportunities for students. Community schools also put an important emphasis on collaborative leadership, right? So this can include establishing at a school site, shared responsibility amongst the educators in the building, but also involve schools using strategies like site-based leadership teams in order to create more participatory decision-making opportunities for members of the community. And last but certainly not least is the pillar around active family and community engagement. And perhaps this is best captured by the idea of schools functioning as neighborhood hubs for their community, right? It's places where educators ensure that families are involved in the decision-making about their children's education. Also, in part of the framework, the state has defined key conditions for learning, and this really draws on the science of learning and development that Ms. Brackenridge shared with you all earlier in the day. For California, there's also cornerstone commitments, which articulate, the unique approach the state is taking to community school implementation and the values behind that, as well as proven practices that support high quality implementation. I know this is a lot of information on the slide. I won't talk through each of these points, but I just wanted to leave you all with sort of the understanding that CCSPP is defining a robust implementation approach for community schools. And alongside the state and regional technical or transformational assistance centers are creating learning opportunities associated with these pillars, these conditions, commitments, and practices in order to support full implementation of the strategy in schools across the state. And lastly, before passing it back to Sarah, I just also wanted to note that alongside the CCSPP grant funding, the state has also made a number of investments over the last few years that can support community schools. This through LEAs can then blend and braid these different funding sources to support the strategy. I've included a couple different, a number of different examples that kind of highlight these different funding sources the state has invested in, organized by the different pillars. But for those that are interested in learning more, we have a brief that some of our colleagues have produced linked at the bottom of the slide to go into further detail about each of these, the dollar amounts attached to them and kind of spending windows for those funds. But with that, I will pass it back to Sarah to share about the Oakland Unified research.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Danny. And yeah, so as you can see, from this overview of CCSPP, the role of districts and systems level implementation for community schools is key. So I'm going to be talking about that today. I'll be focusing on Oakland's Community Schools Initiative, presenting findings from a case study that LPI completed about a year ago. So this is research that I did with a few colleagues, Julia Daniel, Kendra Fair, and Anna Mayer. And we selected Oakland because of our interest in this district's level infrastructure, kind of question, around how district level infrastructure can support community schools, Oakland really is an ideal place to look at this question because it has had a long-standing full-service community schools initiative. It's been in place since 2011. That was when the district formalized its commitment to becoming a community schools district. This means that all schools in the district are community schools. Of course, there's a range of implementation, right? So some schools are implementing the community schools approach with, really strong fidelity, and others are somewhere along that path. But from the district perspective, all schools are community schools. I think we can go to the next slide. And then we also chose Oakland because since they began their community schools initiative, they've seen some notable gains and achievements, which suggests that the district is worthy of study. In particular, I would draw your attention to graduation rates, which have improved significantly for all students, but also for particular student groups, and the suspension rate, which has dropped significantly. Suspension rate is a blunt measure of school climate, but it's good to see that it's declining. So I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about methodology today, but I just want to reiterate that one of the key research aims of this research study was really to understand the way the district is structured to support community schools and whole child education. We did data collection at the district level and at the school level. So we talked with district personnel and then did interviews with lots of school staff, district principals and community school managers and teachers and parents. And then we also we combined that original data collection with administrative outcomes data, and then also a longitudinal study of the Oakland initiative, which was conducted over 8 years. So that helped us bring in some of the sort of a historical overview of the initiative, since it's pretty long-standing. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the ways that systems level support supports community schools in the district. And there are 6 different features of district infrastructure that we highlight in the report. I'm going to focus on 4 of them today, just because after I spoke with Chair Tostin, to my ear, it sounded like these 4 would be the most relevant for this particular group, but I can certainly talk more about the last 2 that aren't bolded during question and answer if there's time, if those are of particular interest as well. Oh, yes, and I just wanted to say too that the broader report on this case study is long. I do sometimes jokingly refer to it as like my second dissertation, but there are some briefs that that are shorter, which you can access. And there is one that is specifically just about this piece, the district role in community school development. So if you want to know more about any of the sort of features of district level infrastructure that I'm going to talk about today, this would be a good brief to look at. All right, so the way I've organized these slides, I really want to emphasize the way that district level support allows schools to do things they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And so you'll see the sort of aspects of district support on the left side of the slide, in that rectangle there, and then on the right side graphic, this is sort of the practices that district infrastructure supports schools to do. And the first sort of piece of district infrastructure that I want to talk about is county level partnerships. So OUSD, or Oakland Unified, has a formalized collaboration with county level agencies. So that includes probation services, social services, and public health. All of this is codified in a master agreement. And so this agreement outlines different roles and responsibilities for all of those different entities. The most comprehensive partnership is really with public health, Alameda Public Health. That partnership has been in place since the start of the initiative, and they worked with Oakland to ensure that health outcomes were sort of centered in the initiative right from the beginning. And through that partnership, the district has been able to put school-based health centers in place. So there are 16 school-based health centers in Oakland. And the Alameda Public Health was also instrumental in developing the district's cost structure. I'll talk about that in more detail, but coordination of services teams, or COST, are site-based teams at school sites that are dedicated to matching students with needed resources. This is a universal structure in Oakland, one that I think would be of particular interest to this group. And what we heard from the schools in our study was that this structure really supports schools to match students with the supports they need, and also that these sort of district level collaboration with public health allows students and families greater access to health services, either at low cost or no cost. And then I guess, you know what, I'll save that next point for another slide. So we can advance, Danny. Thanks. Partnership management and support. External partners are really a key piece of community schools. So as you likely know, by definition, community schools are expanding the functions of a traditional school. They're offering a wider range of services and supports for students and families. And to do that, in Oakland, I should say, to do that, they are utilizing a broad range of partners. In Oakland, they have really centralized and streamlined the process that schools use to partner with external organizations. So they have a partnership approval process. They onboard new partners quarterly. There's letter of agreements and MOUs that the district has set up. So all of this is really important because it removes what would be a big administrative burden for schools. And also it also has the impact of removing redundant work across schools. What we heard from schools was that these partnerships really allowed them to offer a broad range of services, everything from dental services to mental health counseling. And in particular, these partners are very important for expanded learning time and enriched learning opportunities that are offered, outside of the traditional school day. We included this graphic. This is from one of our school sites that were part of the study, Urban Promise Academy, which is a middle school. And this graphic is depicting the partnerships in place at that school, just because I wanted you to get a sense of just how many partners schools are working with and the different kinds of services that these partners are providing. So you can see there's upwards of 15 partners that this school is partnering with regularly, and they're providing all different kinds of services, from parenting classes to mental health supports to arts enrichment to academic tutoring. And this is typical of schools in Oakland. They are partnering with a large number of partners. And you can imagine that without some sort of centralized administrative support for this, that this would be very cumbersome for schools. All right. I wanted to I mentioned before coordination of services teams. COSTs are school site teams that bring together different kinds of school staff and partner representatives. And I just also wanted to flag that I wanted to just make sure that I'm talking at a pace that is working well for the interpreters. So please do pop in again, Chair Tostin, and let me know if the pace is too fast. As I mentioned previously, these COST teams are a universal structure in the district. All schools have a COST. Their main job is to identify student needs and match students with resources. And students can be referred to a COST for a variety of reasons. It might be that students are in need of an academic intervention or an attendance intervention. It could be because of a behavioral issue. And a number of different people in a school setting can refer students to the COST. These COSTs are supported in a number of ways by school staff, or by district staff rather. There are district level behavioral health managers that support schools to set up their COST, that help problem solve issues as they arise, that model facilitation of COST meetings. And the district provides training and support for cost leads, those that are sort of leading those teams. They also have developed a toolkit for costs, which have templates for referral systems and sample meeting agendas and all kinds of tools that people on that team can use. And then on the right-hand side, in terms of what that allows schools to do, and what we heard from schools was that the cost structure had really brought an increased collaboration across different kinds of staff, that schools were able to more efficiently identify student challenges and then systematically connect students with resources. And again, this links back to what we talked about in terms of partnerships, because the cost structure is a mechanism. It's not support services in and of itself, but it allows students and families to access the supports that are in place due to that network of partnerships. Well, and I included this quote from the Chief of Staff in Oakland Unified, because he's speaking to sort of the central role that costs play in their community school approach. So he says, cost embodies what community schools are about, which is that interdisciplinary cross-sector way of supporting students. The fact that you can have your after-school director there, you can have a medical person, a mental health person, a youth development person, an administrator, a teacher. It really is this idea that we are a village here and we're all pitching in. It's a structured way of doing cross-discipline case management. And then the last feature of district level infrastructure that I want to talk about today is the development of effective community school managers. As I mentioned before, definitionally, community schools are expanding the functionality of schools. That means there's new work streams, new structures, new work processes. And in Oakland Unified, the community school manager role is the role that makes it possible for schools to do this. And what the district has done to support community school managers is they've brought some coherence to this role. You can imagine it's a new role in many schools. It's a unique role in that there's only one per school. And so there could be confusion around what this role is and what the responsibilities are for this person. Oakland's identified 5 different areas of work for community school managers. These include family engagement, cost, which I just spoke about, attendance support, health access, and partnership support. And then the district also does the hiring of community schools and community school managers and matches those managers to a school. There's also a pretty robust professional learning supports in place for community school managers. So they have a inter-school professional learning community, which we heard from our community school managers in the study that was very helpful, given that they don't have peers at their school site to problem solve with. And so what we heard from the schools in our study was that this role was very essential for building stakeholder relationships, particularly with family members and community partners, and then connecting, family members and community partners with school staff. And that it's because of this role that schools are able to facilitate access to all kinds of services and support. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I'm looking forward to hearing, questions that you have about this, but I did just want to recap and say that, I really think the main takeaway here is that the work of building and maintaining community schools we can't really think of that as exclusively school level work. Districts have an essential role to play in scaling and sustaining community school implementation. And then, I also wanted to say that for this group, the state has made this large investment in community schools as an equity strategy. And I do think that as the state is rolling this out, the commission has an important role to play in ensuring that this strategy meets the needs of all students, particularly students with disabilities. And I think there's more to unpack there, but I just wanted to say that before moving on and talking about some of the resources that might be helpful for your group, for your commission. Actually, Danny's one of the authors of this resource, so I'll pass the mic to him to introduce you to it.
Sure thing. Thank you, Sarah. As part of the resource we have available on our website, developed a community schools costing tool. So it's an Excel-based tool. It's intended to function as a cost calculator that can help practitioners estimate the cost of a range of positions and supports that are common in community schools. we developed the cost estimates based on input from experts in the field and practitioners, with particular focus on what would it take to provide these services and supports at an adequate level for high quality community schools. So, for example, what would it take to hire and retain a high quality community school manager? And then we further adjusted these estimates to allow for regional cost adjustments. And lastly, I'll just note that though we provide these estimates, users of the tool are also able to input their own numbers if any of the estimates don't feel appropriate for their context. So there's a measure of flexibility in being able to determine costs that new and existing costs that might be already accounted for in current spending in order to come up with that estimate of implementing a community school.
I wanted to bring your attention to this literature review that LPI produced. This reviews, I think it's over 140 different studies of the studies related to various pillars of community schools, but then also community schools as a comprehensive approach. This has become something of a landmark publication in the field. I see it referenced all the time, but would be very helpful resource if you want to dig in further. And then on our website, there's just a ton to dig into if you have a further appetite for learning about community schools. So if you go to the URL at the bottom, there's additional community schools research resources related to teaching and learning in community schools, the rollout in California. And I'll also say that you're also always welcome to reach out to Danny or I. We're happy to field questions or point you towards resources that might be helpful. And I guess before I conclude, I'll just say that I hope that we have further opportunities to interact with this commission. LPI supports a lot of community schools research and policy implementation across the state and the country. And we'd really love to learn from the experts in this group around how the community school approach can center the needs of students with disabilities and make that front and center, and then get that learning out to our partners. So, I hope that we'll hear about other ways of connecting with you all.
Sarah and Danny, we just want to say thank you so much for the depth of information that you provided with us, and I'll just share with the commissioners as we were coordinating this presentation and talking about which information would be most useful to highlight. If you read the full report, there are components directly connected to special ed, but we thought it would be important to understand the structures that are in place at a core level, because when we talk about transformative work, I know, at least for myself, I can go, oh, that's transformative and it'll just happen. And what we wanted to highlight and provide more understanding is the level of coordination it takes, not only at a school site or a district level, but at a school site level. And as Sarah and Danny really pointed out, school is just one component of that. And so the level of commitment required by a full community to change practices and ensure that voices are heard and that we learn through doing, as Oakland has for a number of years, implementing and learning and iterating and improving as they go, which, as highlighted by the data, is resulting in a higher achievement in certain areas across the district. So just wanted to pause and check the dais. Any additional comments or questions? All right.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I have a much better understanding of what community schools are. On your page 11, under research focus and methodology, it said Oakland had a combined data of an 8-year longitudinal study of the district. How long was Oakland doing this for, and did they have to study it for 8 years before it could be implemented?
Yeah, thanks for that. No, our study brings in data that came from an 8-year longitudinal study. The Community Schools Initiative has been in place in Oakland. Well, let's see, they started doing their strategic planning in 2010. And then in 2011, the board adopted a community schools approach. So it's been in place for now over a decade. I hope does that clarify? I hope so.
Yes, that does. I didn't realize it was the 8-year-long study was from you guys.
Oh, no. So let me clarify further. The 8-year study was actually data that we brought in through Kendra Fair. She's one of the authors of the report, and she's also the author of a book called The Way We Do School, and it's a historical overview of the Community Schools Initiative in Oakland. So if you really want to dig in, there's an entire book you could read.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Maybe I'll get to that book one of these days.
I also appreciate on slide 8, just where you delineate all of the investments or number of investments, some dating before 2023, and by my rough math, and I've been pretty transparent, an English major by training, close to $20 billion in investments in not just community schools, but systems transformation. And so, as we've learned in a number of presentations, the public school system was not designed for our day and age. I'll just say that. And so as we have an opportunity to shift our focus and be transformational, our work to center the experiences of the students that are highlighted through our work as a commission in terms of students with disabilities, but also recognizing the whole scale, system-wide changes that need to happen. And so as we think about the current support structures for districts, how can we as an advisory commission continue the conversation and spread the word and understand what our statewide partners, intermediate agencies, how they're invited in the conversation, and we leverage some historical strengths and practices from intermediate agencies, county offices, as well as community-based organizations and the FECs, PTIs. How do we bring family empowerment centers, parent training, I forget the I, information centers. How can we bring everyone into the conversation and understand here's an entry point, here's a leverage point that we can build and amplify work that is already underway or has been underway for a number of years. So as we shift to public comments, Sarah and Danny, thank you so much for your time. Actually, now I see comments and questions on the day, so hold off on public comments. Commissioner Weiss.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. And I know you said that you can speak to the other 2 tabs that weren't highlighted, and I don't need you to totally go into family engagement, but if maybe you can give me a few first steps about, how that might look.
Sure. Yeah. So, one of the key things that the district has done to support family engagement is invest in this community school manager role. So, as I mentioned, family engagement is one of the key things that falls under the purview of community school managers. So there's a dedicated person to someone that's really dedicated to family engagement. But then they've also dedicated resources to some core practices. So, for example, one of the big trainings in Oakland Unified is around parent-teacher home visits. This is an opt-in practice on the side of the teacher and families, but there's a lot of training in the district around how to conduct visits to families in their homes. And then the district has also provided a lot of training for school site councils. So I'm sure the school site councils is a familiar structure to you, but as a decision-making body in the school, it's one that includes family members. And the district has sort of taken a bi-directional approach to building the capacity of both parents to develop their leadership so that they can participate effectively on these committees, and then also to school staff so that they're creating committees that are welcoming and inclusive of family participation, in ways that are authentic and not just rubber stamping parent participation. I will say that of the sort of 6 different features of district infrastructure that are highlighted in the report, this was the one that I think is most challenging, and where there's still a lot of room for growth in Oakland, and that is not unique to Oakland. That is I think that's true for many places across the state, and the country.
Thank you.
Of course.
I just quickly wanted to comment on how you took the 6 district roles in the development and broke them down into the district support. But the box that says allows to, which I consider like the purpose or the objectives, is really beneficial for each because it really does show what the purpose is.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's really exciting to see this coming to existence. I didn't realize Oakland had this for so long, so it was good to hear that we could learn from their experiences. I was wondering how you had a list of resources, and so I'm still becoming familiar with a lot of the concepts. I wondered if the resources address the different challenges and opportunities for districts that are smaller in areas where, in some ways I was thinking, well, maybe it's easier in a small district or small school because everything is already like there anyway. They can easily pull it all in or be more flexible than maybe a huge district. But I wondered if those differences in size, and I know you say every community is different, right? Every community school is going to be different, but I wonder if some of those broader challenges that might be kind of universal across just based on the size of a school, when we were talking about districts up north that are having difficulty just drawing in teachers, how does this model fit in that type of environment? Thank you.
That's a great question. I'll jump in with a response, and Danny, please join me if you have anything you want to add. So yeah, I'll just say, in the case of, Oakland's big, right? There's almost 35,000 students, maybe more in Oakland. So there's a lot of district level staff that can support an initiative like this. If you're thinking of a smaller district that might have one high school, one middle school, and a few elementary schools, where are you going to get all these community school managers and administrators to support them? So this does look different in a rural district or a small district. In some cases, we've seen counties take on a role that looks something like what a district role would be. One place I would highlight is West Kern County. They're doing some great work, and LPI will be doing some case study work there soon. So stay tuned. We don't have, as far as I know, LPI doesn't have studies of smaller, more rural districts, but there are some out there, and I'd be happy to point you in that direction. But I'd have to dig them up. So I can connect with Chair Tostin about that if that's of interest.
Thank you. I'm wondering, like, if SELPAs or other entities, or I'm using the wrong word, if others step into those roles, sort of like how we do for other areas of special education, if that would be a role that they could take in as well.
So, seeing no additional comments, I would just take a moment to highlight the Shasta County Office of Education, which is one of the regional technical assistance centers for the Community Schools Grant, and their work with smaller rural school districts. And I think it's, in my experience, the challenges are challenges of scale, but very similar challenges. And so appreciate Oakland's transparency and vulnerability to be part of the study and share their learnings across the state. And I think it's a great insight around how small rural schools can be the hub of a community, and recognizing for larger districts, community is still very school-based. The Oakland Unified is a larger district, or one of our larger districts, but the report really highlights the local relationships at the school sites within the larger district structure that provides those supports. And so, Sarah and Danny, thank you so much for the research that you've shared with us and your time today. I'm certain as we continue this conversation, we'll be circling back, and I can tell you from experience, once you begin looking at resources on the website, give yourself some time, because there's a rabbit hole of learning and inspiration there. So thank you so much, Sarah and Danny, and we look forward to our continued conversations.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
I will ask our support team if you could share the slide for public comments for those participating via the internet, and ask anyone in the room, members of the public who would like to make comments, to please line up behind the podium. Seeing no members of the public in the room wishing to make comment, we'll close public comment in the room. Are there any callers online?
There are no callers at this time.
So we will conclude this agenda item, and we will revise our agenda. We were scheduled to take a break, and just want to highlight to everyone, we're a minute ahead of schedule, so we're doing great. But based on conversations we've had and recognizing that some travel commitments, we will continue on through the break, through agenda building and closing the general public comment. And so with that, I will transition us to the item 15, committee reports and agenda building. I'll ask the goal committee to share out their conversations first, in the legend policy, and then we'll transition directly into agenda building.
Thank you. The goal committee met, and if you're in the room or online, if you can help me when I forget things, because I will have some lapses in my memory. My food is digesting. It was delicious. We had the bulk of what we're about happened yesterday when we had the Dyslexia Matters group present to us, and we were able to celebrate with them a lunch with Dr. Lungi and Ms. Castro from San Bernardino City Unified. And thank you again for coming up and sharing with us. We want to again congratulate them, and again thank all the those who applied as well. It's always great to read the applications and see what is going on, and we wish we could highlight every single one of you. And so we appreciate the time that the applicants made to put in their programs for our opportunity to look at them. We did want to. I did mention to yesterday's presenters that we were in the process of having, I believe, the first time we've ever had a plaque made to recognize the Gold Award recipients. So Commissioner Snipes is helping us to get that done. And then Commissioner Sorter and maybe Commissioner Wilkins will be going, we're going to coordinate with the program and see when we can come to one of their local board meetings in the fall. We'll let them start school and get settled in a little bit. We'll try to find a time where we can go have ACSE member commissioners present in person a plaque and recognize them. We would like to reach out to their districts, what is it called, media relations person, and maybe they can get the word out to really get them celebrated for that. Don Hamilton, Commissioner Hamilton, has already drafted a write-up about the winners for our ACSE annual report. And I think it was Don, someone had a great idea. The picture that we took yesterday, if Mary Grady is around, we're going to ask her if we could probably insert a little bit that photo in there. It would be great. The other thing we talked about was the celebration we had for the winners yesterday could not have happened the way it did without the help of the SELPA administrators of California. They so generously sponsored the lunch that we were able to have for them yesterday, that all the commissioners were able to sit and meet with the winners, and everyone got to celebrate with them. And they are also sponsoring, they'd actually approved up to $2,000 at their meeting. They are, just to clarify, they are a nonprofit, so there's no special ed funding that's being spent here. And it's the SELPA administrators of California. So Chair Tostin, if anybody was watching the last meeting, he had kind of mentioned, hey, maybe Scott over there, we can get some sponsorship help. And it happened. this self-association, they really, as Scott mentioned yesterday, what the Gold Award is about really aligned with what they do and what they want to promote. And so we were fortunate enough to get together with them and find a way to celebrate the winners that I don't know has happened before in this way. So we're really excited about that. And Scott Turner, who is the incoming president for the association, has indicated the willingness of the association to continue with something similar, some similar support to sponsor the winners in the coming years. So thank you, Scott, and thank you to the Self-Association, the board, who all voted, I understand, unanimously to support our Gold Award winners this year. We're really grateful. We were in a bind last time. We didn't know what we were going to do. I was going to start a GoFundMe, and so it all worked out. And then Shiyloh and team helped coordinate it all together. So thank you. Everybody came together to make that happen, and we're really grateful. We are still in need of major donors for the award itself and an ongoing award funds. And so we will continue to look into that. And I'm going to follow up with Commissioner Estes to see how that's going. And then I understand, I think the Dyslexia Matters group is going to be speaking at the SELPA Association meeting. I might be wrong about that, but if that's something we can somehow recognize and highlight and share out their program, that would be a wonderful avenue if they're able to do that. I'm not saying they are; it's not my role, but I wanted to at least we wanted to send out a letter to SELPA to thank them for their sponsorship and support of this program. So that is the major news, I think, from our committee. The other one is that Commissioner Michaud has graciously accepted the taking over of my role as a co-chair for Goal Committee. We're going to transition in the next October meeting, and then he'll take over for the following year. So I'm still going to be on the committee in case there's some good food coming down the line. I'll always be there for you. So thank you, everyone. Did I miss anything? Did I forget anything? Okay, thank you.
Just want to thank everyone who was involved, and again, acknowledging our partners from the state social. Slow down, David. From the State SELPA Association for their generosity and continued partnership and willingness to be responsive when put on the spot. Before we move on, is there anything else we want to put them on the hook for in public? Perfect. So we will make sure that there's space in the agenda at the next meeting for the Goal Committee to continue their conversations during our work session times. And I just want to be clear, the follow-up letter, I don't believe we need to take action, but I'll work with Christine to draft a letter of appreciation for the State Association for their support. All right. Perfect. We will transition to Commissioner Nanach to talk about ledge and policy.
Thank you. Today we continued the work that I spent more time explaining yesterday in the report out on our strategic planning process. So as a continuation of that, we reviewed all of our current liaison partnerships and then aligned them with our goal and priority areas to make sure that we have the right connections, as well as had a little bit of discussion around building the guidance for liaison interactions so we can have some consistent messages and information flow back and forth. I don't know if I call it co-chair, vice chair, Graf. It's too many chairs. Co-chair Graf, Vice Chair Graf, and I will do that work behind the scenes in our committee work in between meetings and anticipate being able to bring back a document for discussion and potential action in October.
I forgot one thing from my committee, if that's okay. Sorry. I just remembered one thing we did talk about. We mentioned this last time. We do want to review the rubrics for the scoring rubric for the application. And I just wanted to mention that we were talking about making sure that the rubric aligns with our what is the word I'm looking for?
priorities.
Goals and priorities. Thank you. That it matches up with the goal, matches up with the goal. I should remember that. The goals award rubric matches up with the ACSE goals and priorities to be consistent across the board. And then also just for clarity to make sure the application itself reads well. So that's one of the things we'll be working on this fall. Thank you.
And you helped me remember one thing that I forgot, which is we discussed it yesterday, but just to capture it all in one place, we will also be working on looking at that equity rubric and updating our language to bring that back for discussion and action as well.
Part of the conversation during the Legend policy work session was to begin the affirmation or the assignments for initial liaison work. And as we said, the Legend Policy Committee will flesh out some of those details, but just in general, the liaison work is not necessarily committing hours per month with each organization. Sometimes it is just sharing our priorities and listening with different groups. And so the liaison assignments as they stand today, and I want to thank everyone for their willingness to contribute. There are still a few others that we need to finalize, as some commissioners weren't present today for the conversation. So in no particular order, the liaison for the special education administrators of county offices, I want to appreciate Commissioner Sorter for being willing to be the liaison for that group. Commissioner Wilkins will be the liaison for the state special education local plan area administrators. Commissioner Sorter has also volunteered because of a connection with another role to be our liaison with the Association of California School Administrators. I want to thank Commissioner Mishad for being the liaison with the Charter Schools Association. Commissioner Ruiz with the Family Empowerment Centers and the Parent Training and Information Centers. Commissioner Estes with the Mental Health Services and Oversight and Accountability Commission. Commissioner Liu for the California School Boards Association. Vice Chair Groff with the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing. We are still working out who will be the liaison for the California Teachers Association and CARS Plus, the California Association of Resource and Other Special Educators. I want to identify Commissioner Topolin for her willingness to be the liaison with the Pupil Personnel Services Coalition. There are many more acronyms and statewide organizations on the list. So this represents our initial body of work, an initial point of contacts. And Vice Chair Groff and I will also be point and the liaison with our appointing bodies and the state agencies. We have begun discussing ad hoc assignments as well. For example, how can we maintain connection with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, given their role in conjunction with the CDE, the department, and the State Board of Education related to the statewide system of support. At our October meeting, we'll finalize our committee co-chairs, but for the sake of time and to give us enough time for agenda building, want to shift into that conversation. And so appreciate everyone's patience as we are transitioning to a new structure for our meeting in terms of how we line up the different topics as well as how we commit our time. Some of the lessons learned through this first cycle will be implemented at the next meeting. We'll be adjusting some of our report outs to a different time on the second day, so later in the afternoon, and so that we can hear all of our conversations throughout the first day and a half, and then digest them, and then report out and leading into agenda building. And so with the structure that we're adopting for this year, and we'll get to information out there, there are roughly 9 slots for presentations, and some of those need to be reserved for committee time. And so looking at our October meeting, we have some commitments in place already that were, someone over here lost my notes. I just want to be clear about that. We have commitments in place for mental health. Commissioner Estes asked to postpone a presentation that we were going to have today for our October meeting. We will need to devote time to the seating of our new commissioners who will be joining us for the first time. The special ed division highlighted earlier that it will be the time to review the annual performance report and what's the S one? The state performance plan is also an agenda item. The Family Empowerment Centers had previously requested an opportunity to speak to us in October. And a follow-up conversation, continuing our conversation related to community schools. Kristen Wright and Hayen Kilmer weren't able to join us today, but we wanted to continue the conversation with those two partners related to community schools. And so by my count, we have roughly 5 of our slots filled. And so I would open it up for other topics for suggestion, with the understanding that if you are making the suggestion from a committee or liaison stance, that you understand you're also committing to facilitate that presentation. And so if you suggest, for example, we'd love to learn more about topic X, we would love your participation in learning more and identifying potential speakers for topic X. That will ensure that as we are reaching out with our support team from the department, we at least have a starting point of where we might begin calling for folks who can make a presentation. So with that, I will pause for any questions. If there are no questions, suggestions for agenda topics for our October meeting.
I'm trying not to commit myself to anything except that when we discussed the Goal Award winner last time, we talked about possibly inviting if I'm saying the acronym right, BASES program from, I want to say it's Mount Diablo, and I thought that might work also because of the mental health aspect. Maybe that works with what Commissioner Estes is doing for that day. So I'm not sure if we've invited them yet, or if we would like to look into doing that as a possible nice connection to what was already going to be happening.
I remember that conversation. Thank you. So we'll reach out to the other applicant for the Gold Award that we highlighted at our previous meeting to bring back for a conversation or a presentation on their work. Commissioner Notch.
Bringing up a suggestion from Commissioner Oyakawa earlier about the alt pathways, alt diploma. I don't know if October is the best time to do it, but I know it's of great interest to the Commission. I would also like to hear something about literacy proficiency, but it's because I don't know a lot about literacy proficiency, so I have 0 experts that I can shoulder tap, but happy to help make connections from whoever can pass them along.
As it relates to literacy, I think our starting point might be the literacy directors in connection with Superintendent Thurman's literacy initiative, who have been charged, I think, by statute to create a roadmap. And so that might be an initial beginning place for our understanding or deepening understanding and conversations related to literacy as one of our priority areas.
I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Notch, the alt pathways and alt diplomas, because I think October, if it's possible, that would be a great time as we start the new school year for those students and families who might have an interest in hearing about it before it's too late in the year. I'd like to learn more about that as well and that timing, if possible.
By my list, I believe we have kind of fulfilled all of the slots for the external presentations, and so we will start there as a place to build the agenda. And I recognize there may be additional input from members of the public or commissioners who weren't able to join us in person today. I do want to pause. If there are any commissioners who are online, I wanted to give you an opportunity to provide input on agenda building.
Yeah, I think that I had mentioned at our June meeting, adding the California Tribal Families Coalition to the list of potential external presenters at some point, and I'd like to keep them on that list.
Thank you, Commissioner Snipes. I will follow up with you about the coordination. Definitely, if not the October meeting, we can begin planning out as well. And so we may have all of the invites for the October meeting, but as you are doing your liaison work and as committees are having conversations, please look at the calendar, and we can reserve spots months in advance. Like, there's nothing that precludes us from planning the whole year out and giving folks enough time to plan their calendars, because we recognize some folks are very busy and their calendars might be booked months in advance. I might also suggest, as we continue these conversations with one of our priority areas being parent to student and family voice, that we balance how we allocate our time while we're here. Obviously, there are a number of presenters and experts, and we want to recognize the expertise of those who are experienced and users of our system. Going back to where we began our conversation with understanding the experiences to inform our beliefs, and so inviting students, parents, community organizations, and members to inform our dialogue as well. I will scan the dais for any last pieces of input and ask for the slide for public comment to be posted. And we'll invite anyone in the room, any members of the public wishing to make comment or commit more resources from their nonprofit organization. And Kara, we see you back in the room too, so. All right, seeing no members of the public wishing to make comment, we'll hold just for a few more seconds before we close this item.
And there are no callers.
So we will close that item, and I will ask that you leave this slide up as we move into our final agenda item. General public comment, and so any members of the public, as we have all meeting, if you'd like to make comments online or in the room, please line up behind the podium now. Members who are online, please begin dialing in, and we will hold for, we'll give it a minute, and then we'll transition. Seeing no members of the public wishing to make comment in the room, we will close public comment in the room and transition to any online callers.
Caller ending in 7407, please state your name and affiliation. Your time starts now.
This is Judy McKinley. I am involved with learning disabilities. I would like to ask that there be more emphasis put on the largest handicapping condition in the state of those with specific learning disabilities, and that there be more information addressed at commission meetings for specific learning disabilities. Thank you.
That concludes the callers for this item.
Right. Well, before we move into adjournment, just one last announcement. We will be publishing the Advisory Commission on Special Education annual report in the coming weeks, days. I forget the timeline now, so I want to pause and thank all of the commissioners for your contributions, as well as our editors from the Supporting Inclusive Practices Project, Chris and Mary. Thank you so much for your flexibility and patience with the chair who keeps blowing deadlines, and your responsiveness. And I want to acknowledge the, at minimum, 9 teammates who comprise the interpreters, CDE staff, captionists, as well as the audio and visual technicians. Thank you so much for your support. We hope that your days at work with us were pleasant. Until next time, thank you very much. We will see you in October.